CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by CyberEars. If you are serious about your podcast hosting needs, you should check out CyberEars. Whether you are a podcaster, a radio host, a musician, a narrator, an audiobook author, or simply a school, church, corporation, or anyone else with an audio recording that needs to be hosted or distributed, you should check out cyberears.com. Unlimited bandwidth, fast, reliable, and rugged servers with no hidden fees. CyberEars. Your audio, your terms.
Listen. It's getting closer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet? Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
You are listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast, a delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information featuring the Tandy Color Computer. All right. Welcome back, CoCo Cruisers, to another episode of the CoCo Crew Podcast. Here we are. This is episode 20, and we are here with, of course, I'm John Linville, and we're joined by Neil Blanchard. Say hello, Neil.
Hello, everyone.
And Mike Rowan. Hello, Mike.
Hi. How's everybody doing?
All right. Well, how is everybody doing? You guys feeling good? Getting over the turn of the new year, the end of the holiday season?
Yes, it's going to be a great year ahead.
Well, let's hope so. I think we're going to get into that a little later. But yeah, so it's year starting off. We're now just 3 months away from of course, the CoCo Crew start of the new year will be at CoCo Fest. We're just 3 months away from that.
3 months.
3 months,
That's
right?
awesome. Getting excited.
It is getting exciting. It's already at this point. If you haven't got a project going for CoCo Fest, you're almost you're never too late to get started, but you're kind of under the gun, right?
Yeah, it's panic time.
But anyway, so what kind of projects are you guys working on? You got something going?
I've been working on those joypad adapters, doing the last final run, or at least with the PCB boards I have left. So I got another 20 built up, and also working on a Dragon to CoCo joystick. I guess you can call it a converter, so you can use CoCo joysticks on your Dragon.
Cool.
Cool. So that's just adjust the plugs from the 6-pin to the 5-pin.
Yep. So you don't have to hack your CoCo joysticks to plug them in your Dragon. You can just use this little adapter, and away you go.
Nice.
Cool. That's awesome. What about you, Mike? What you been working on?
Well, I've decided, since we talked about it last episode, I'm going to go forward with a repack. So starting to get the pieces and parts together for that. So hopefully it'll turn out nicely. It's not going to be anything really complicated, but I think it'll be nice when it's done.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw where I think Ron Delvaux or maybe someone else was posting pictures of repacks on some of the Facebook groups inspired by our talks last month, I guess. So that's cool. It's nice to get people focused on some projects, no matter what the project is, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
So I've been toying around. I kind of went from having just vague project ideas to actually getting into a few projects, and now I've got too much going on.
You're overloaded there.
Yeah. So the thing I've posted publicly about is I've built a prototype audio board for the CoCo around the Texas Instruments SN76489AN programmable sound generator. Which is a chip that will produce 3 voices of tones and a voice of noise. It was the sound chip from the the Tandy 1000, and also used in, I guess, the TI-99 and the ColecoVision and a number of other consoles and even some arcade games and stuff back in the day. Anyway, I've used one of the proto boards that I designed for the Super Pack and put that to use to build actual hardware to help me work out the circuit details, which weren't totally clear to me just looking at the data sheets. Aside from that, I've also was doing some CoCo 3 programming, working with the graphics, working on scrolling, working out both horizontal scrolling and vertical scrolling. Still kind of trying to find a game to fit the mechanism. So not sure if it'll be horizontal or scroll or vertical or both. The idea there is to get a game that actually makes use of all the extra buttons on the Sega Genesis joypad to work with the joypad adapters that Neo's working on. But I don't know. Working with this audio chip, but may make me want to build some sort of super cartridge with an audio chip included, and then I need a super game to make the super cartridge worthwhile, and I may have to work on nothing but that for 3 years.
Well, you've got an entire 3 months till CoCo Fest, so.
Well, there you go, 3 months. That's probably just long enough to lay out the board and get them back.
I was going to say, it might be possible to get those boards, because I remember last year, those boards were February, what did they say, the 16th on those joypad adapter boards. I was putting those joypad adapters the first week before CoCo Fest.
Yeah, I remember the panic waiting for parts.
Yeah, the parts is the bigger problem, but it does take some time for the boards, but it's a little more predictable. If I was done with the layout, I'd have plenty of time to order the boards and get them in and at least build a few up. But right now I haven't quite decided how much stuff I want to put on the layouts and whatever else. I don't have a game laid out to use it. I was thinking maybe we need another edition of Farfall.
I'm okay with that.
to use the audio chip. Done a few initial experiments there, which have been, well, I don't know, stumbling blocks here and there, but so that may be what we do. We'll see. I don't know how many of those would sell, but at least it's a project to work on. Not everything has to be sold at CoCo Fest, right?
That's right.
Anyway, what about acquisitions? You guys acquire anything new recently, eBay or otherwise?
I've acquired a Tandy computer and mouse. Not necessarily old, but it's Radio Shack.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw those. I was going to send you one for Christmas, but then you went ahead.
That's what happens when I'm going around in Radio Shack.
Well, I jumped in and got a TL866 Mini Pro so I can get back into the EEPROM burning business.
Oh, cool.
So already got my chips and everything. Just haven't had the time yet to. Hopefully this weekend I will burn something and see if I've got it working right. I'm using it under Linux. So
cool.
The other thing I got this was kind of right after Christmas. Have you guys ever heard of a Rocketbook Wave?
No.
It is it's a notebook, and the pages have like a grid on them, and there's a QR code at the bottom, as well as some little icons, and you write in it with a Pilot Friction pen, and there's an app you have for your phone. You can take a picture of it, and no matter what angle you're at, because of the grid and everything, it will always orient it perfectly in your photo. And then it's got these icons at the bottom that you can link to different electronic repositories. So like if I have a page I want to send to Evernote, I can just use my pen to check mark that icon, and when I take a picture, it automatically goes into Evernote. Or I can set another one up for like Google Drive or email to people. But what's cool about it is that these friction pens they're called that. They're erasable, like gel pens, come in a bunch of different colors. And they have instead of eraser, they just have this rubber end. And it's actually the friction of rubbing it that makes it disappear, makes it erase. So it's clean. It doesn't leave any residue. But with the reason they call this the Rocketbook Wave is that it's 80 pages in the book. And when you've got it filled up and you've taken all your pictures, you put it in the microwave. And when you microwave it, it erases all the ink in the book, and you can start over.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that on the website as you're talking about that. My wife was just mentioning this recently. I had no idea what she was talking about, and suspected that she didn't either. That is pretty neat.
Yeah, but I'm loving it because, and it orders all the pages when you take the photos of it and everything. So you can take pictures of it out of order. It'll show up in order where you send it. And I haven't used it, but I think it depending on your writing, I think it does OCR of your notes too.
Oh, very cool. That looks pretty cool. About $30 it looks like. So, yeah, nice.
Definitely good.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. For me, I did pick up. I got a CoCo 3 for $100. I thought that was a pretty good deal. The Canadian one.
Oh, Canadian. The French.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It may have a little French on it, but it's from Canada. Speaks English to me. I think I picked up. Yeah, after Christmas, I picked up an MC10 that was on eBay. Didn't really need it, but sometimes they're just too cute to leave alone. It was about $20, I think.
Oh, that's a good deal.
Yeah, good price for one.
Yeah, I think that one even came with the adapter, the AC adapter. So,
wow,
I might have to contact Mr. Snyder for another composite kit. And anyway. Well, cool. Well, it sounds like we're all active, getting ginned up for CoCo Fest here in a couple of months. I don't think anybody's got any plans for traveling together this time. I've been trying to goad my son into coming this time, but I don't know if he's going to come or not. But anyway,
he came a few years back, I remember.
It's been several years. Yeah, he was just like maybe second or third grade when he came, but. Now he's a 7th grader. Well, I guess that's enough of an introduction. We'll go ahead and take a short break and come back with our announcements. Ta-ta.
Good morning, students. If I can have your attention, today's lunch will be spaghetti with meat sauce, buttered lima beans, lettuce salad with Thousand Island dressing, milk, hot roll, and fruited gelatin. Also, don't forget, this Friday is the annual after-school dance. Admission is $1. Please bring a bag of chips. A duffel was left in the hallway near the trophy case. If this is yours, please come to the office immediately. Yearbooks will be $15 this year. Please have your orders and money turned in to Miss Fletcher by no later than the 14th. Cash only, please. The Computer Club wishes you all to know that CoCo Fest will be held again this year on April 22nd and 23rd in Lombard, Illinois. This year marks the 40th anniversary of the TRS-80. All TRS-80 computers are welcome. The Math Club also wishes to add that you should all become part of the equation. This is all, students. Have a great day.
And now we're back with some announcements. You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast. We are on Twitter, available as @CoCo Crew Podcast, all one word. We also have a page on Facebook. Just search for the CoCo Crew Podcast as 4 separate words because we love consistency. We are... The CoCo Crew Podcast is available on iTunes. We're available for streaming on Stitcher. We're available through Google Play. And for all you Amazon Echo fans out there, we are available through TuneIn. So if you have an Amazon Echo, you can just say, hey, however you signal that thing, Echo or whatever, play the latest episode of the CoCo Crew Podcast, and we should pop right up. So that's kind of cool, huh? We are a member of the Throwback Network. If you're not familiar with the Throwback Network, it is a collection of retro-themed podcasts, many of which are dedicated to retro technology, like old computers, such as the CoCo, the Atari 8-bits, and some other stuff like that. There are a few tossed in that are 80s culture, such as Retro Obscura and, well, I don't know. You'll have to go check out the list. There certainly are a collection of non-gaming podcasts included. But, if you're looking for other podcasts, do check out the Throwback Network. Similarly, we are listed on the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. This is also a collection of retro-themed podcasts. These are almost all technology related to gaming and gaming systems and home computers from the 80s or maybe the 90s, maybe even a few from the 70s. Anyway, so if you are looking for other podcast sources, be sure to check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Audio for the CoCo Crew Podcast is hosted by Cyber Ears. If you're in need for hosting of audio files on the internet, then I advise you to check out the offerings at Cyber Ears, where you will get your audio on your terms. If you need to reach the members of the CoCo Crew by email, we have some addresses set up that will reach all of us together as show@cococrew.org, podcast@cococrew.org, or feedback@cococrew.org. Should you want to reach one of us individually, I'm available as John, John, @cococrew.org. Neil is available as Neil, Neil, @cococrew.org. And Mike, of course, is available as Mike, Mike, @cococrew.org. That is our standard list of announcements. But as always, we like to include announcements for some upcoming retro-themed events. Our next event in our list is an event that's actually hosted near me in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Playthrough Gaming Convention, which is scheduled for February 25th and 26th of 2017. This is a GamerCon or whatever. It's a gaming-oriented event with emphasis on both video games and cosplay and tabletop games and whatever else. I've never been, just judging by their website. Looks like a cool event. If you're into playing games on a Saturday afternoon, it's probably a cool thing to go to. So anyway, that is the Playthrough Gaming Convention, February 25th and 26th of 2017 at the Raleigh Convention Center. Coming up after that, in March 31st through April 2nd of 2017 is Vintage Computing Festival East 12, or XII. They adopted the Roman numeral numbering system, I don't know, was it just last year? I guess they're sticking with it. I noticed that the Super Bowl went back to a Roman numeral numbering as well. I feel cheated I didn't get my Super Bowl L. Anyway, Vintage Computer Festival East 12, March 31st through April 2nd. That is 3 days. The first day is a Friday. That's for the serious nitty-gritty geeks to come and have some in-depth sessions on things like repair and care for your retro computing stuff, how to clean them, how to keep them going, that sort of thing. Whereas the Saturday and Sundays are more for the general interest audiences that will come through and take a look at things and maybe have some seminars of more historical interest, that sort of thing. Anyway, the link is in the show notes. I advise you to check it out. It's a good event. You guys both planning to go to VCF East this year?
Yes.
I am. Yes.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way. I still haven't quite pulled the trigger on it. I need to go. I'm actually going to be, well, no, I'll be traveling a couple of weeks before that. So I may or may not be able to make it, but I'm kind of leaning that way, so we'll see. Anyway, 3 weeks after that event will be the big event for the big event that originated this podcast, shall we say, the 26th annual last Chicago CoCo Fest. This has been for years the big event in the CoCo community. This is certainly the event where we all came to each other's acquaintance. This will be held on April 22nd and 23rd of 2017 at the Heron Point Convention Center in Lombard, Illinois. This is a great event, lots of friendly people. Primarily, it's a show floor style of event. People come in, walk around, look at each other's stuff. People usually have their own projects to display and, what have you guys been working on this year, that sort of thing. Also included is on both days, Saturday and Sunday, is the no minimum bid auction, which is a great event, lots of fun, lots of opportunities to get good prices on the CoCo stuff. Maybe not as good as you used to could get, but hey, that's goes with getting a bigger audience, I guess. You get more people show up ready to spend money.
Are you two going?
CoCo Fest?
Yeah, you two going to CoCo Fest?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think I'll show up too.
I hope you'll show up as well. If not, we might have to stop along the way and hijack you into the truck. Anyway, it's a great event. They're continuing the tradition they started last year of including a Saturday night meal on premises. So I don't know if there'll be any singing or not. But I guess it depends on who attends and whether or not they want to sing.
A lot of people were impressed with the food last year, so I'll probably partake this year.
Food was excellent.
Yeah,
it was good.
I was very pleased. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. So anyway, hopefully, last year we talked about we want to blow the doors off the fest. We didn't quite blow the doors off this past year in 2016, but we made a significant bump in the attendance as far as I'm concerned. We would love to see that happen again, certainly to maintain that high level of attendance at CoCo Fest and maybe even increase it a bit more. I'd still like to see the doors blown off the place. I'd like for them to have to call the cops or the firemen or something, but
yeah, let's get the fire marshal word. Everybody show up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you're listening to this podcast, you will probably enjoy yourself at CoCo Fest. It may be a long journey. Just take a couple of days off, enjoy some Chicago area festivities around the weekend if you need to pad it a little bit to justify the trip. But do come. It's a great event. CoCo Fest itself is great. And, like I said, lots of stuff in the Chicago area you can see. Go to the Field Museum or go up the Willis Tower, get the view of the big lake, that sort of thing. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, moving on. The next event on our schedule here is the Southern Fried Game Room Expo 2017. That is scheduled for June 9th through 11th of 2017 at the Renaissance Atlanta Waverly Hotel and Convention Center. Looks like a cool event. Looks like they have a variety of games, particularly arcade style or pinball games. Let's say Southern Fried Game Room Expo features more than 250 arcade, pinball, and console machines. The 4th annual Southern Fried Pinball Tournament, tabletop gaming, a vendor expo, exciting programs and guest speakers, movie screenings, and so much more. So if that doesn't excite you, I don't know what else will. If you are near enough to the Atlanta to consider going there, I think it looks like a great event. I've never been to it, but I'm very tempted to go. Seems like a friendly group of folks from what amount I have interacted with them. So, again, that is June 9th through 11th, 2017. Make your plans. All right, coming up in July 18th through 23rd of 2017. We're now talking about Kansas Fest, or K-Fest as it's also known as. K-Fest is, of course, an Apple II-oriented event. If you hate the Apple II, you will hate K-Fest. But if you are at least somewhat interested in the Apple II, or if you had some exposure in the past, as many of those of retro computing interest or age to be interested in retro computing, many of us have had some exposure to the Apple II, even if it wasn't our primary retro system. So you may find some interesting stuff to do at K-Fest. Of course, this is how long is it? So the 18th to the 23rd, that's what, 5 days? Is that 6 days? 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, that's 6 days. You spend the event at a dorm, in a dorm at Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri. And you hang out with a bunch of other retro geeks, basically day and night, and hang out in the dorms and listen to people talk about Apple II and related stuff. They have seminars. They have an interesting event the first night. They have a long table they stack full of Apple II and related items, and it's the free table, and it's basically a free for all. You just pick stuff up off the table and carry it back to your room. So it's the only thing I've ever seen rival the no minimum bid auction in terms of fun and profit. Anyway, so if you have any interest in the Apple II and you are free in July, then I would suggest you look at booking the space at Kansas Fest 2017. They're not going to do these things forever. Right? Okay, here's I think this one might be new this month. Commodore Vegas Expo version 13.0. So this has been going on for a while. Somehow I had not heard of it before, but I'm not a Commodore fellow, but I'm not prejudiced. July 29th and 30th of 2017 at the California Casino in Las Vegas, Nevada. I hear that a lot of people like to go to Las Vegas for some reason. That is kind of a fun place. Sounds like in this case, if you're a Commodore person, it might be even more fun in this last week of July or last weekend of July. Let's see. What do they say on their thing about Convex? It's Vegas, baby. Convex is storming Las Vegas, Nevada, July 2017. Fresno Commodore Users Group and Las Vegas Commodore enthusiasts have worked hard to make this year's effort the best Commodore show in the United States. I don't know. Check out the website. There's a lot of pictures. A guy wearing some sort of Commodore bag on his head. Lots of geeky folk hanging out. If you like Commodore stuff, I'm sure you will enjoy the event. So there you go. July 29th and 30th, 2017, Commodore Vegas Expo. Coming up just a week after that, CoCo Expo. That is August 5th and 6th of 2017. This is, again, the CoCo Expo being held at the New Jersey Convention and Exposition Center in Edison, New Jersey. Seems to be gaming-oriented event, although I know previously I've seen pictures on here that included Cabbage Patch Kids. Let's see, they're listing a featured guest of Tyler Burnell. This was the one with the featured guest of Sophie Reynolds, who's Disney Channel's Ashley Parker on Gamer's Guide to Pretty Much Everything. So there's the link. It's some sort of gaming show on Disney. Featured guest, Polycade, Retro Arcade Future, Tyler Bushnell. Oh, yeah, I remember this. This was a Kickstarter. That's Tyler Bushnell is the son of Nolan Bushnell, who was a founder of Atari. And he was pushing some sort of Kickstarter for basically you could have some sort of home arcade cabinet you could hang on the wall or something like that. Anyway, if you want to talk to Tyler about that idea, make your way to Edison, New Jersey in August for the CoCo. All right. Our last kind of standard announcement here, or almost, Again, we've been hawking these for a little bit. If you are a podcaster or have other means of disseminating audio content and would like to promote CoCo Fest, our own Mr. Rowan has produced a number of very interesting promos, entertaining. Have them available on my website. The link here is in the show notes. He's made a couple of extra ones recently. I need to get those updated and put out there as well. We need to get some more promotion of CoCo Fest because, everybody needs to go, basically.
So true.
All right. And so one more last minute announcement. A couple of episodes ago, we announced where Brett Gordon had produced a program to let you, in combination with a CoCo SDC card, you could listen to the CoCo Crew podcast as well as some other podcasts with proper preparation, shall we say, on your CoCo 3. He detailed a method of combining some artwork in the audio stream and putting them into a file that goes on the CoCo SDC, and then you could listen to your podcast with your CoCo 3. Mr. Rowan has taken that tutorial to heart and is now going to be doing that conversion for our listeners, and we will make a link available through the show's webpage. And so if you are wanting to download, I believe they're called PDC files for podcast, I guess. We will have a link provided, and you will have the files converted, and you'll be able to take those files and listen to them on your CoCo 3. So very exciting. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, Brett, for making that program, and thanks, Neil, for hosting the PDC files. So thanks all around, huh?
Yeah, I think we'll put the actual player out there as well, so you can grab that at the same time. And if you haven't played this player, it's really awesome. I actually like the controls, playing them on the CoCo better than like my phone app or whatever. So yeah, it's a nice. It works well.
All right. Well, that is our announcements for this month. I think we'll take another short break, listen to some message from our sponsors, and then we'll be back with some news.
The best in America, Radio Shack. Nobody compares to Radio Shack. A name people trust, products they know, a service to count on. There's one place to go. The best in America, Radio Shack. With so much more than just a store. Radio Shack.
Hey, Neil, is it time for the news?
It is. First set of news for 2017.
All right. New news. Okay. Well, the first item we have, the first two items come from the Hackaday website. We take a lot of information from Hackaday because it's a cool site and they do cool stuff. People do cool stuff to get on Hackaday. And they do have a fair amount of retro-oriented stuff that shows up there as well. But anyway, the first one, Apple II web server written in BASIC. This is, of course, a web server, serving HTML and text and picture images and that sort of stuff. And of course, it's written in BASIC, and they're using an Ethernet to Ethernet interface. So this is an Ethernet card for the Apple II. It's based on the W5100 chipset, which is one of those chipsets that basically offloads all of the actual TCP/IP networking. So it's almost like having an internet modem, and then that then downloads HTML or whatever, or uploads in this case. I don't want to, diss anybody or whatever, diminish anything about it. It's definitely a cool project. But they're not implementing all of the networking here, and they just have hooking into the Ethernet card. This card is similar to what Jim Brain has kind of been working on. I've actually got one of his prototypes here that I've not done a lot with, but I know Brett Gordon has done some interesting stuff with his prototype of the same card. So if Brett and or I would get off our rear ends and produce a little more infrastructure code for this card, then you could be writing a web server in BASIC and get your name on Hackaday. So my apologies for having not done so.
Just need to find that infinite time.
Well, yeah, infinite time bubble would be nice if anybody's got one that they're not using. Anyway, so it's a cool project. It shows there are other people out there interested in doing some goofy stuff. If you could write a web server in AppleSoft, you could write it in Color Basic because it's a much better BASIC. Don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so let's throw a little dirt at the end.
Just being biased.
Yeah, we're just a little biased, but that's okay. Moving on, our next link also from Hackaday. This one's portable Apple II on an AVR. And so what is this? So this is a neat project in a number of ways. It's neat. If you just look at the construction, they've got a piece of perf board with a bunch of tactile switches that serves as a keyboard. It's got just a couple of chips on it and then an LCD display. And so basically you could cup this thing in your hands and type with your thumbs, and you'd have a little computer. And in this case, the computer actually is running with an AVR, says AVR 1284 for the chip, which I guess is one of the larger AVR processors. AVR is a modern 8-bit processor used in a number of, physical computing or 8-bit embedded kind of applications. But in this case, the AVR is running an emulation of the 6502 processor, which is not the 6809, but it was contemporary with the 6809, and of course was used in the Apple II and a number of other machines back in that era. My point being that if you wanted to produce an equally cool looking project with tactile switches for a keyboard and all that sort of stuff, there's no reason why you couldn't do one that acts like a 6809 and runs Color Basic instead of whatever this one is running. So food for the mind here, food for thought. This is a cool project. I think we all would agree. And I'd love to see one of these show up at CoCo Fest, but one acting as a CoCo instead. Don't you think that'd be cool?
Definitely.
Yeah, you definitely should follow that link. It's cool to see typing on that little thing, and it'd be cool to have that in your pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I say, you could probably take exactly this hardware, or pretty damn close to it, and just implement a CoCo instead of an Apple II. You just would need the 6809 emulation or whatever. So this is not unlike the FPGA based CoCo projects that Roger Taylor and Gary Lamb. What's Gary's last name?
Becker.
Anyway, Becker. There you go. Gary Becker have done. This is not unlike that, but in this case, rather than this is like a mix between that and say MES or XROR or something, where it's you've got a piece of hardware doing the emulation, and so it's going to feel a lot like real hardware, kind of like the FPGA does, but in fact the emulation is all done in software. I don't know. Kind of a cool project. Spend enough time on talking about it. We're going to move on. Anyway, but thank you, Hackaday, for providing that link. Okay, so our next three is our monthly edition of What Has Jim Gary Been Up To? So, as always, Jim is a prolific porter of code to the MC10, and like you said, quite often those MC10 games also end up on the CoCo as well, and they're in BASIC, and so if they're not already on the CoCo, you can probably figure it out for yourself if you want to contribute, so that'd be a cool thing too. Anyway, this first is a game that comes from the Acorn Atom. Acorn Atom is interesting in one sense because it uses the same video chip as the CoCo and the MC10. So that probably makes porting from it for some of this stuff a little bit easier. Anyway, this game is called Cup Ball. I don't know a lot about it. But, it's like so many other Jim Gary games, take a look. Could be fun. It's probably better than not turning on your CoCo or MC10 at all. Right? So, warm it up, run a Jim Gary game. Should be fun. The second one is something called Amazing, which looks like some sort of maze game. I don't know what else to say about it, but it's a cool another cool new game for the MC10 from Jim Gary. Again, based on a port from somewhere. I'm not sure where. Again, check it out. Get your MC10 out, warm it up, and check it out. Finally, Jim's got a third one called The Island of Secrets. This is a type-in from a book that is one of those that was made available. We talked about this a few months back, where this company, Usborne Publishing, made some of their retro computing books from the past available for free download. And so in this case, apparently this Island of Secrets program was a type-in program from one of those books. And so Jim has taken that and made it available on the MC10, ported from the Commodore 64 version. Very cool stuff. Again, Jim, I think he never sleeps or never rests. Feel sorry for his MC10. It's bound to be a very, very tired little MC10, although at least it gets lucky. So, all right. So anyway, moving on. The next link, this is from someone named Steve Loesch. I'm not sure. The title is Chip 8 in Common Lisp, the CPU. Basically, so if you read the thing, he talks about how he was interested in writing a Game Boy emulator, and he wants to use Common Lisp. Lisp is a language with a lot of deep computer science kind of roots from the past. It's the one with lots of insane and silly parentheses. That's what Lisp stands for. This is one of those computer science languages that you're supposed to learn just because you have to think so differently to operate in Lisp, that it's supposed to exercise your mind just by learning how to do it. Anyway, I've never learned that much Lisp. I've tried to learn it a bit just for the experience, but never found a love for it. But I've included this link here, because it is Lisp and it's sort of a retro computing topic sort of on its own, and because instead of a Game Boy emulator, he ended up writing a interpreter / emulator for Chip 8. And Chip 8 was a kind of dumbed down language. I don't know if dumbed down is really the right term. Let's see. Wikipedia says Chip 8 is an interpreted programming language developed by Joseph Wiesbaker, initially used in the Cosmic VIP and Telmac 1800 8-bit microcomputers. Blah, blah, blah. Chip 8 programs are run on a Chip 8 virtual machine. So basically it's a virtual machine implementation designed basically for running simple graphics video games on, old computers. And so, it's got a neat little instruction set. It's kind of conceptually is similar to programming the RCA 1802 processors. It's not binary compatible with that, although it tended to be implemented on those machines. So there's I think the instruction to exit your Chip 8 program is actually a machine jump on the 1802 or something like that. But it does support some simple graphics. A couple of years ago, there was somebody who was working on a Chip 8 interpreter for the CoCo. The person kind of showed up and then disappeared. Not sure what happened there. I think you might still be able to find their project out there on GitHub or something like that if you're interested. Anyway, there are a lot of Chip 8 games out there that were developed for both for these RCA machines like the Cosmac, but also it seems to have been popular on graphic calculators. So it could be a source of gaming entertainment if you wanted to revitalize or do your own Chip 8 interpreter for the CoCo or MC10. There'd be some Chip 8 programs out there that you could get running and do cool stuff with and be a hero to the community. So step up, why don't you? Anyway, if you don't know about Chip 8 or haven't learned about it, or if you haven't learned about Lisp, either way, that link might be fun to check out. So go check it out. So moving on, this is Neil's favorite link in the stack, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is Wolfenstein 3D. Do you remember that game from the mid to late 90s, I guess? Ported to Game Boy Color on a turbocharged cart. And so basically, they're taking a Game Boy Color, which I don't know if you don't know much about the Game Boy, you'll actually find it's not that different from any other 8-bit machine. It kind of has some similarities to the NES, which is probably not that surprising. But it's got a little Z80 processor in it. It's got tile-based graphics. It's got a little more advanced sound and graphics than the CoCo does, but it's not that far out of the league. And so you can imagine, how would you ever get a CoCo or something close to it running Wolfenstein 3D, right? On the one hand, you never would, but you probably could do something like what they've done here. And so they've taken the cartridge capabilities that are available to the Game Boy cartridges, and they've basically added a processor on a cartridge, which is similar to what happened with a lot of NES and Super NES and other console games later in their lifetimes in the late 90s or maybe early 2000s even. And so basically he's got this advanced code running on this CPU that's part of a cartridge. So if you're ambitious enough, theoretically you could do this on a CoCo. You could build a cartridge that plugs into the CoCo and then has a much more advanced processor running on it. And it wouldn't be that different in some ways than the cartridges that we think or know that existed back in the days where you could run CPM on a Z80 processor plugged into a CoCo, or one where you could plug a 68,000 processor into the CoCo. Nowadays you could build one that has an ARM processor on it, and then you could run whatever you can run on an ARM processor and display out on the beautiful graphics on the color computer.
Yeah, that's really cool. I remember they used to do this kind of stuff back in the day to bring life into the machine, to give it extra life before a new console came out.
Yep.
It's kind of neat because we're doing it in the retro hobby.
Yep.
Somebody was doing that with a propeller processor, weren't they?
Yeah, somebody did a project like that a few years back, and where the propeller completely took over the machine, and just use the CoCo graphics chips and whatever. But then that person kind of disappeared. I guess they scratched their itch and left. Yeah, there is a similar project out there right now for the Vectrex, which of course has a 6809 processor in it by default. But there's a cartridge that plugs in and has, I think it's I'm not sure. It's a more advanced processor. It might be ARM. It might be something else, but it's running an enhanced BASIC on it, and then it lets you write programs in BASIC to draw vector graphics on your Vectrex screen. Those are available on eBay right now. It costs about $100, $150, I think. But yeah, I've got one.
Yeah, that's cool.
I haven't done a lot, but yeah, it's kind of neat. The only downside being is that some people are complaining that, well, if I write a game with that, then the only people who can play the game is other people who spent $150 on the cartridge. Like, yeah, well, I guess that's sort of the way it works. Right. Anyway, this Game Boy cartridge on a coprocessor, this kind of is illustrating the extremes that you could go to if you wanted to enhance your CoCo with a monster cartridge plugged into it. You could do something like that. We'll see what happens. Anyway, moving on. Our next link, the CoCo PSG, a chip-tones cart for the CoCo. This is from Ed Snyder, and he is working on a cartridge that will plug into the CoCo, and it's going to have. It looks like he's got the Yamaha YM2149 sound chip, which is an equivalent to the General Instruments AY38910 that might be somewhat more familiar to people. Anyway, these are programmable sound generators. They have, I guess, 3 voices of tone generation and a noise channel as well. These are pretty flexible. I think you can do a lot to mess with the envelopes on the sound and maybe the different waveforms, that sort of thing. Anyway, it's a nice chip for doing sound. He's produced a card around it, and in his card, he's also adding 512K of flash and 512K of SRAM. And so I guess that's for storing up audio data to be used later. And then I guess because the sound chip offers some parallel ports on there, he's also added 2 digital gain ports to his cartridge. So, if you had this cartridge and a game that supported it, you could just bypass Neil's Sega joypad. Just plug directly into Ed's CoCo PSG or whatever. He posted some video of it. It sounds good. No shock there. And it's a neat project.
Is that still in development, or is that available yet?
So I think he's still working on it. He's got a couple of projects he's talking about on Facebook, and I think there might eventually be some crossover where they might become one project. He's talking about a 16 meg card as well. I don't know if they'll become one project or if they'll borrow from each other. Yeah, he's talking about a 16 meg bank switched cartridge. So you'd bank switch it down 16K at a time or 8K at a time. Then I'm not entirely sure why. I guess it's supposed to help with big graphics updates or whatever. He's anyway. We'll probably talk more next month as some of that stuff stabilizes. But anyway, this is about his PSG cart. He's got something in the line in the works. It's going to have the nice sound chip, and then it's going to add some flash and some RAM. And if you want to take advantage of it, if you want to write some software that takes advantage of it, it'll be a wealth of hardware capabilities. Of course, as always, it always remains to be seen what software does show up that can use it. In this case, this hardware is kind of beefy, so without somebody providing some hardware to use it, I'm not sure the average CoCo user will be able to make much use of it. But we'll see what shows up. I think Simon may be in the loop for developing some of the software. I know he was working on a tracker composer at one point. Maybe this was the target that he was looking at. I'm not sure.
No, we'll stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll stay tuned. We'll see what develops there. So the next link I have in the list, this is from Fred Kanopaska. I don't know, Fred. If you're listening, let me know how I'm supposed to pronounce your name, because I'm for some reason stumbling over it. Kanopaska, something like that. There you go. That sounds passable. Anyway, he's apparently he's produced a project that comes out of the full turn of the screw. From that was the Di Stefano. Oh, my mind's fried now. The Tony Di Stefano book. And so he's copied one of the projects out of there. He's produced a PCB using a milling machine, which is kind of neat. If you've ever seen these PCBs, basically they use a CNC or to route out the traces. So they kind of look like a PCB with a big ground plane, which I guess effectively they do. That's what it is, but they've just cut it out instead of etching it out. And then no solder mask, but beggars and choosers, I guess. But anyway, it's a neat project, and I guess it's an SPO 256, so it's a speech card that he's added on there. And so, but yeah, now he's included the Eagle design as well, a little bit farther down. So it's a neat little project if you're looking for speech synthesis. I've never been a big fan of speech synthesis on the old computers. I remember as a kid it seemed like a really cool thing, and just over the past 30 years it's just become more disappointing.
Yeah, I'm a fan of this project Fred did because you're right. When that chip came out in the late 70s, everybody was doing this, and that's why, to me, it's a good retro thing because every platform was doing that, and it was just kind of cool to see somebody actually pull out the book and seeing his milling process and everything. It was pretty good. So, hey, Fred, if you make this a kit, I'll take one.
Yeah, I'll second that.
That's true. I'll buy one if you want to sell me one for sure. It looks like a cool project. Sorry if I dissed it, but like I said, I'll be happy to buy one to make up for it. All right, moving on. So the next one is a pretty cool project here, I gotta say. So the link will take you to 8-Bit Workshop, and it's an Atari 2600 simulator. All right, running in a browser. I think it's written in JavaScript. And so on the right side of the screen, you'll see flashing lights or whatever. On the left side of the screen, you'll see assembly language code. And it's actually the code for what's running on the right side of the screen. And there's actually an assembler built into this web page. And so the net of it is you can write Atari 2600 assembly code on this web page and press a button and it'll assemble it and load it up and run it on the other side of the page. and as if that's not cool enough, which I included it mostly at that point because I thought that was really cool, and maybe we have some talented web style developers that could do something similar for the CoCo, right? You could have a CoCo. Imagine having a web browser, a web page where you could write CoCo assembly code on one side and have it run in an emulator on the other side. That would be really cool. That would be hella cool. Right?
I was just thinking that.
Sweet, yeah. That's a cool site too.
But if you're looking at this page, on the bottom right it says "Want to learn more? Get the new book, Making Games for the Atari 2600." And if you click on that is a link to Amazon.com, and you can buy a brand new book published December 2016 that tells you how to write programs for the Atari 2600. And so if you have any interest in doing that, now granted it's not the CoCo, but I learned quite a bit writing Atari 2600 stuff as an experiment that I then apply when I write code for the CoCo or any other kind of 8-bit assembly language. So it might be worth your while to check it out. But yeah, this is a brand new book that you can learn how to write 6502 assembly language and programs to run on the Atari 2600. That is cool. If you're into retro stuff at all, that should warm your heart that exists at all. Is amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm checking out the site right now. Cool. Yeah,
very cool. All right, the next link I have is from Guillaume Major. He posted in the Dragon 32/64 owners users group on Facebook, and basically saying CoCo STC Explorer for the Dragon is now available. And so we talked about this one last month. I think CoCo STC is a kind of a file manager style of application written with some knowledge of the CoCo STC, so it can mount and unmount disk images and that sort of thing. And of course, the CoCo STC actually has some support for running with the Dragon instead of the CoCo. And so I don't know how much adaptation it took for the CoCo STC Explorer to work in that environment, but whatever it took, it's been done. And so now Dragon users can also enjoy using CoCo STC Explorer if they have CoCo STC hardware. So pretty cool. Dragon users, I hope you enjoy that. Okay. The next one. This one has a special little place in my heart. This is from Glenn Hewlett. Glenn is, I don't know how long he's been around. I've never been aware of him until fairly recently. But near Christmas time, it shows up with this post of Space Invaders CPU translator from Intel 8080 to Motorola 6809 for the TRS-80 Color Computer 3. And so he's got a little blog, and he's talking about he getting back into writing code for some 8-bit stuff, and says something about one thing I never understood was interrupts. And I was listening to the CoCo Crew podcast with John Linville as a tech talk, and he talks about CoCo hardware and blah, 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 blah. And it says he got to thinking that he should write some code. So it's like, hey, that's really cool, right?
Yeah.
So we inspired somebody to write some code for the CoCo 3. That's pretty cool. Other than going to CoCo Fest, then that's probably our second objective, is to write people to inspire people to write code for the CoCo 3. Maybe you should write the code and then go to CoCo Fest. But either way. So this is pretty cool. So he's got a project where he is taking the 8080 code from Space Invaders, and is basically doing a byte-by-byte style of translation of that code over to the 6809 CPU running on a CoCo 3. This is actually similar to a project Mark McDougall had done in the past. But I think that's okay, especially, it's a good exercise to do stuff like that and do it for yourself, not just read that somebody else has done it and walk away, but go ahead and do it for yourself. I think that can be cool.
Definitely.
It's also similar. Yeah, it's also similar to the project where Sockmaster translated Donkey Kong to the CoCo 3. I think Donkey Kong probably is a somewhat more complex piece of software running on somewhat more complex piece of hardware than Space Invaders, but still, I would definitely give props on this project because of the in-depth amount of effort translating the machine code. I think he's even got a tool he wrote in C that helps with some of that translation that he is making available. So very cool project overall. Definitely happy to see this, and definitely happy to get a little plug for the podcast in here. So very exciting. Glenn, welcome to the party. We're happy to have you, and I hope to see you at CoCo Fest. Of course, moving on to the next link, also from Glenn Hewlett. Now, I guess he's done with Space Invaders, and now he's porting the original Pac-Man arcade game to run on the CoCo 3. Although this way he's restructured his blog now a little bit, and it says Zilog Z80 to Motorola 6809 transcode. The Z80 is similar to the 8080, but kind of a souped-up version of it, so it's a little bit different than just the 8080 part. He's now got a series of blog posts that are kind of spread out across the month of January, and probably will continue into the month of February. I don't know. Most recent blog post today. So he is still working. So hopefully we'll see a Pac-Man project come out of this as well. Or is it Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man? I guess it's Pac-Man. Very cool. Nice to have somebody come in with some gung-ho projects, don't you think?
Yeah, it's cool to see.
Sure.
Very exciting. So Glenn, welcome to the CoCo community. We're expecting good things from you. All right, moving on. Let's see. Post is from Nathan Wade. Is a post to the Facebook Color Computer group. Says, don't know if y'all heard about this, but a new version of Orange Pi Retro Orange is out, and it supports Tandy CoCo. Looked at this a little bit. It looks like this is for a board that's similar to the Raspberry Pi, but not the Raspberry Pi. Something similar. There's several boards out there that are kind of in that category. Anyway, this is kind of a retro gaming kind of distribution for that hardware. And so with that in mind, it's cool that they've included the CoCo in there. If you're looking to build some kind of massive multi-retro emulator kind of box or whatever, maybe something inside of an arcade cabinet or that sort of thing, you may want to check this out. It's always nice it's always nice when you're doing a project where you can work on the part of the project that you actually like and not have to do every other bit of the project. And so if the part of the project you really like is woodworking or installing joysticks on a box or whatever. And the part you don't necessarily like is, collecting emulators and working out boot scripts and that sort of stuff. Then maybe somebody's already done that other part for you.
Is this basically MAME running on a Raspberry Pi platform?
Yeah. It's like I said, it's similar to Raspberry Pi.
Sure.
But it's not the exact same hardware, but pretty similar. And yeah, it's advanced MAME. There may be other emulators involved. I'm not really sure, but definitely MAME is part of this stack here. Pretty cool.
A lot of CoCo stuff runs really well under that, so they probably just compiled it for that. But yeah, cool.
So let's see. Moving on, Retro DIY Computer Project by Cadero 2T. I don't have a real name for this person. What is the project here? Let's see. Oh yeah, so this is basically an implementation based on the Grant Searles 6809 computer, which is a cool project that's been out there for a while. Which is sort of a minimal chip machine you built around a 6809 and like 3 other chips or something, similar to the 68 or to the Simon 6809 boards that some of us in the community have. I know everyone here has one. I think Kip Kuhn has them, and a couple of other people have them. Anyway, so he's implemented the Grant Searles design. He's got another one of those cool little routed PCBs. I need to get a PCB router, I guess. Anyway, it's cool. He's using Grant Searles code, I guess, where he's taken and gutted the color basic, extended color basic ROMs to provide basic running on his board. And I don't know, just overall, it's a cool little project. And it's kind of a take on retro computing that you're not exactly building something entirely new. You're not exactly running something that's old or original either. You're kind of in between. And I think that's cool. If that's exciting to you, I think it's a good way to spend some time. All right. Now here's one. Let's see. Ken Sharif takes us inside the IC for fun. I haven't actually had a chance to sit through all of this talk. I've seen some of Ken Sharif's other talks. I think he's got a interesting blog that talks about, well, he's got some cool stuff on it. Let's say it that way. Anyway, this is he talks about decapping CPUs, which is where you actually or chips, and so it's where you actually take that little ceramic or plastic chip, some of which actually have kind of a window on them, but most don't. And it's like making your own window by cutting a hole in the side of the house, or in this case, scraping off or using acid or whatever to remove the tops of these chips, and so that you can actually physically look at the silicon wafer that makes up the internals of the chip. And so if you can get a high enough resolution picture of that, and if you are bored or or determined enough to walk through looking at that high res picture, you can actually look and you can look at the structure on the chip and say, oh, well, this little bit here is a transistor and it connects over to this other transistor, and the way this transistor is configured, it really acts more like a resistor and that sort of thing. And this is a diode, blah, blah, blah. And so if you know what you're doing and you have the time and patience to do it, and you have a good enough view of the chip, you can actually deconstruct and actually reverse engineer the internals of the chips. And people have done this for, most famously, like the 6502. I think in this case we're talking about the Z80, but there's other chips that people have done that for. It's an interesting hobby. Yeah, I mean, I can understand it enough to imagine how it's done. And have enough understanding of it to say that I cannot ever imagine me doing it, just because I do enough weird things most other people think is pretty weird and boring. This is one that I'm not going to be doing. It is it's interesting that somebody would do it. You know what I mean? From a archaeological sort of perspective or whatever. You might find it interesting. Take a look. and hope you enjoy it. Anyway, moving on from there. I don't have a link for the next one because I just got a private email. Probably everybody who bought an MPI from Ed Snyder got a similar email, or at least if you bought one that is potentially affected. If you have an early MPI from Ed Snyder, apparently he has some, I guess it's a firmware update or an FPGA update or something. I don't know. One way or another, there's a problem with, I guess it's with the cards that use SLIN-B, which among other things is the Super IDE uses SLIN-B. So the mini MPI won't necessarily work with those cards correctly, and I'm not sure about the details of the exact problem. Ed, you may want to contact Ed if you need to know those exact details. Anyway, the email he sent said, send them back to me, I'll fix it and send it back to you. Just wanted to include it here so you're aware. If you have a mini MPI from Ed Snyder, you may want to send it back to him and make sure that you get the update. Cool?
Yeah, I got to send mine in. I just got it, and then I got the email.
I just bought mine after the email, so mine came with the correct code on it.
Very good. Very good.
You early adopters.
Yeah. A little too early, I guess. All right, moving on. Next link is also from Hackaday. I thought I had these all grouped together, but guess not. The title, Atari now runs Java. Thankfully doesn't require constant updates. So there's somebody's snarky little comment on top. But basically talking about a tool called Java Grinder, which we talked about Java Grinder several episodes back because it exists for the CoCo as well in 6809. Basically, Java Grinder is a tool that compiles Java programs to run on platforms like microcontrollers and consoles. Quoting this article here, by outputting native assembly code and using APIs to work with custom hardware like bespoke graphics and sound chips. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so Michael Cohn is the same person who did the work to get the Java Grinder working on the CoCo. He now has it working on the Atari 2600. That is damn impressive if you know anything about the limits of the hardware on the Atari 2600. It's got a video included. You can actually show it playing a little game. It's not much of a game, but it is playing. There is stuff running on the Atari 2600 that, reportedly here has been written in Java and then passed through Java Grinder. It's amazing to think you could run anything written in Java on the Atari 2600, but you can. It's pretty amazing. I don't know. Yeah, every time this topic comes up, I always remember a big fight on the CoCo banning list years ago, which I think was about a kind of I think it's in the same lineage, but a predecessor to Java Grinder, and caused a bit of a stir anyway, we won't go into it, but always makes me think back. Been doing this stuff a while when you can think back to, older iterations of some of these projects. All right, moving on. Making a game in Pico 8. So we mentioned Chip 8 earlier. Pico 8 basically has nothing to do with Chip 8. It does have a name that kind of sounds similar. But Pico 8 instead is... it's a fantasy console. It looks, it has a virtual machine. I guess in that sense it's similar to Chip 8. It has a virtual machine and a graphics display. And then you can write games that run on Pico 8 using a language called Lua, which is a small shell scripting kind of language, not unlike Perl. Not exactly like Perl either, but kind of similar. I think Lua is used a lot in some of the home wireless routers that people like to hack, using the OpenWRT and similar firmware. Apparently there's a little tutorial someone has produced on how to make Pico 8 games. Like I said, the Pico 8 virtual machine is kind of conceptually similar to a machine from the kind of retro era that the CoCo is a part of. So if that kind of thing turns you on, but your skills are more closer to writing code in Lua than in assembly language, you may want to check it out. Maybe you come up with a cool Pico 8 game, then that'll be enough to then inspire you to translate it back to 6809 for the CoCo. Yeah? So there we go. Thinking again. I hope you'll try it out. Get back to us. Let you know what you think. Let us know what you think. All right, moving on. Another Hackaday link. I didn't group these very well. This is a tiny SCSI emulator. And so basically this is an emulation of a SCSI target. So you're thinking along the lines of something to replace an old SCSI hard drive. And in this case, it uses a teensy microcontroller, which is kind of like an Arduino or something, I guess. Anyway, it uses the teensy microcontroller, and it's actually connected to an NCR 5380 SCSI chip from back in the day. And I don't know how hard those are to get these days. But as long as the supply of those holds, you have a ready way of building a SCSI emulation that can then work with your old Mac or maybe your old CoCo that deals with SCSI peripherals. So it's a neat project. Thought some people would want to be aware of it. So there, you're now aware.
Yeah, it's an interesting project.
I was wondering the same thing, though, about the availability of those chips.
Yeah, well, considering how you can still get most old chips, even for the CoCo, at least not the ones that weren't custom, I would think that the SCSI chips are probably a holdout for a while, too, because they were still using those in the turn of the century. Of course, I guess it matters how much they were produced, which I have no idea. But who knows? Maybe they'll hold out. Anyway, moving on. Robert Galt's patch to enable printing to DriveWire from Disk Basic available on colorcomputerarchive.com. Thanks to Guillaume Major. This topic kind of came up on the mailing list, and I think it's been there for a while. Is why can't Disk Basic make good use of the DriveWire, especially some of the enhanced stuff from DriveWire? And basically what it came down to, aside from apathy from some of the DriveWire developers perhaps, was just that there's not a lot of room left in the Disk Basic ROMs. And so there's not really any way to add code to take advantage of some of this stuff. The point being, DriveWire has some support now for, since DriveWire eats up your printer port, it has support for taking that printer port and actually being able to redirect the output to a printer attached to your DriveWire host. And now Robert Galt's made some code available to enable that capability through Disk Basic. And so presumably at least you can list your programs and that sort of thing. And so Guillaume's taken that code and made it available on Color Computer Archive. So there you go. Exciting stuff, huh?
Yeah, I remember this came about pretty organically, people chatting about it, and boom, it turned into code. So good job, everybody.
Yeah, very exciting. It's the way the community is supposed to work, right?
Yep.
So good stuff. All right, moving on. This is this is from Bill Pierce, a link on the Color Computer Facebook group. This is for the Dragon guys. I've been working on my BootMagic automated Nitrous 9 bootmaking utility, and I want to include the Dragon 64 as well as the Tano Dragon. I know the Dragon has a parallel port. Port is supported by the Nitrous 9 repository. Question is the serial interface. Anyway, so Bill's working on his BootMagic utility and wants to make it work with the Dragon. Hooray, that's good. Needed some information. I think he got some of that information he was asking for. And anyway, if BootMagic sounds interesting to you, it sounds like it's either close to supporting the Dragon or may already support it. So you may want to contact Bill and see where it's at. And link to the discussion is in the show notes. So check it out. All right, moving on. We've got one more interesting talk in the listing this time. This is from Michael Steele. An extensive look at the hardware behind the original Game Boy. It's a cool talk. I've only seen part of this one. I think I've seen him do a similar talk before, so I expect good things from it. It's about an hour long from the Chaos Computer Conference. So if you want to know some details about how the Game Boy worked, the Game Boy Color, oh no, I'm sorry, I guess it's the original Game Boy, you may want to check it out and see how the hardware worked and see how the program the Z80 and that sort of stuff. Maybe you can write your own Game Boy game. Certainly a similar skill set to what would be involved in writing a CoCo game. So a lot of overlap there. If you enjoy CoCo stuff, you'll probably enjoy that too. So check it out. Let us know. All right, getting closer to the end here. Okay, link to the Color Computer Facebook group from Richard Kelly. Says, I guess it's time to post something on this since I've been working on it for so long. He made a color basic program called Ladderman. Sounds like he's back to working on it. Got a sequel. And anyway, point being, it looks kind of cool. It's got some graphics in the link and using the artifact color mode there with the orange and blue and black and white. And sounds like he's making progress on a game, so hopefully there's going to be something out soon, a Ladderman 2 or whatever it's going to be called.
That screenshot looks amazing.
Yeah, it does
That
look
looks
good.
good. So I hope to see something come from that soon. So check it out. All right, moving on. So again, this is not quite a CoCo project, but it could be, or there could be something similar. It's called Key 64 Tapper, a Commodore 64 keyboard emulator. And so basically they've got a little hardware set up where you can plug it in place of a Commodore 64 keyboard and then use a serial port and send stuff over the serial port that gets typed in on your Commodore 64. But if you look at the hardware that's in use, you basically could do, with almost exactly the same hardware, you can plug it into a color computer and a little bit different software, and you could send your serial port stuff through the serial port to it and type on the color computer instead. So if you have need for that kind of a project, if you want to send serial data out to type on a color computer keyboard, you may want to check out this Commodore 64 project. And like I said, I think you'll find the hardware was almost an exact fit. You'll just have to change the software a little bit.
Yeah, you could hook it up to like a terminal server, and then you could SSH or Telnet into it and actually pass code to it. There might be some interesting applications for that. Yeah,
so I think that would be pretty cool. That's a project from Adam Paszczynski. Paszczynski, I don't know, it's a Polish name. I think you just have to guess at the consonant combinations. Anyway, and just in case Adam is listening, I'll be happy to correct your name if you'll let me know how to do it. All right, so here's a neat one. This link comes from George Bauer. Fixing 37-year-old software, 3 Mile Island. Now, this is an Apple II game. So basically, they had a disk image out in the wild for this Apple II game. And then at some point, what was the problem here? Well, anyway, I had this old Apple II game, and there was some operations that's something like saving the game or whatever, that, everything would be working fine until you did a save game, and then it would crash. Which is fine if you never need to save your games, I guess, but it kind of sucks for your adventure-style games if you can't save them. So this Apple II person took it on themselves to see if they could figure that out. So what it turns out is Apple II, the Apple II disk, kind of like, almost like MS-DOS disks, in terms of there's a little bit of the DOS itself on the disk when you format the disk, except in the case of DOS, you'd only really do that if you wanted a bootable disk. But in the case of the Apple II, I guess in every case, there's a little bit of the DOS itself goes on the disk, or maybe every disk is sort of bootable anyway. But the point being is that this game had been written for DOS 3.3, but the disk itself was actually a DOS 3.1 disk, and somehow the DOS 3.3 game got saved on the DOS 3.1 disk, and somehow the binary programming interface that was involved with this save game or whatever changed between the DOS 3.1 and DOS 3.3, and so when you go to save the game, you'd do it in the DOS 3.3 way, and the DOS 3.1 would say, "I have no idea what you're doing," and it would crash. and so I don't know if there's really an analogous thing on the CoCo. There might be. Well, I don't know. We probably wouldn't have exactly the same problem on the CoCo, but still, it's cool that somebody found this old problem on an Apple II game and took it upon themselves to fix it. There's bound to be some archived CoCo games out there that have bugs in them that have annoyed people for 20 or 30 years. And so I'd love to see some people get around to fixing some of those problems, wouldn't you?
Now I could see that problem being on some of the OS 9 games because they're bootable.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know, have that kind of difference between, say, level 1 and level 2 or whatever. I mean, I guess there was that weirdness where level 1 wouldn't boot on a CoCo 3 until you had the level 1 level 1 version 2 or whatever it was. It could be something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I just thought it was a cool story, so I included it. All right, moving on. Getting closer to the end. Let's see. This is a link from Gamma Sutra, and the title's Therapy by Game Development. Won't go into a lot of detail, but basically this person writes about how they kind of gotten in a funk and a little depressed or whatever, and how they worked their way out of it by working on developing games. And so I thought, well, that's cool. Maybe we have a few people in the community who might occasionally end up in a funk. And if you are one of those people, if you're having trouble getting out of your funk, maybe you should try working on a CoCo game. Maybe it'll help your mental health. So very cool stuff. And, if it helps you with your funk, then come to CoCo Fest and tell us all about it.
CoCo Fest will definitely get rid of your funk as well, just to let everybody know.
Yeah, definitely.
Cures all ills.
Lord.
That's right.
Yeah.
There was that ad going around, ask your doctor if CoCo Fest is right for you.
But watch out if you retro compute for more than 4 hours. Oh, Lord. Anyway, the next link, this one, I actually watched this video last night. It's pretty cool. It's a classic game postmortem on Miss Pac-Man. This is a cool talk. Talks about the company that developed Miss Pac-Man, how they started out as a company that was developing speed up kits for arcade games, which were these kind of semi-legal or maybe illegal modification kits you could get to put on your arcade games back in the day to kind of extend their life. And the company made enough money and drew enough attention with a speed up kit for Missile Command that Atari ended up basically buying them out. But in the meantime, they had done a speed up or expansion kit for Pac-Man called Crazy Otto that they ended up selling to Namco as Miss Pac-Man. And so it talks some about the hardware, some about how the software is developed and whatever. It's a pretty cool talk. It's a good use of an hour if you're a retro computing oriented person. So check it out. Hope you enjoy it. I know I did.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable video. And it's kind of cool to think that there was actually, a market where you could sell an add-on board to arcade style games and make it do different things.
Yeah.
That's neat.
All right. Let's see. This final link, news item. The link comes from Eric Gavrilik on the color computer list. And says this just popped up on Reddit, but it's almost exactly the path I keep proposing for CoCo 4 stuff. Build a little old school slot based machine. He says make sure you can get 4 6809s on it in a pinch, thus CoCo 4.
I like that.
I'm not sure you need 4 6809s to qualify as a CoCo 4, but then again, I'm not sure that the machines that are trying to claim the mantle of CoCo 4 really deserve it either. So why not make up your own rules? That seems to be the rule of the day. Anyway, the machine is sort of unfortunately named FAP 80. FAP is a modern day something that's not polite to talk about in mixed company. But anyway, it is a little retro computer style system. They've got, like I said, they're basically slots. They're not using edge connectors; they're using pin connectors, but that's okay. Like I said, it's just a modular build-up kind of machine, almost like a little S100 style of machine or whatever from back in the day. You may want to check it out. Could lead you to some cool project work or pulling your hair out or a little of both. But yeah, so check it out, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our news segment. I think we're going to take another little break and be back with some feedback. So, see you in a minute.
I missed CoCo Fest again! Are you tired of missing the most important color computer event in North America? Now there's an easy way to remember. It's called the CoCo Fest Reminder. Just take the 8.5 by 11 rectangles and use the included CoCo Fest Reminder stylus to write CoCo Fest, April 22nd and 23rd in Lombard, Illinois. Then place the rectangle in an obvious place where you work, live, or play. Each CoCo Fest reminder rectangle is small and compact, and is so easy to use. Create multiple reminder rectangles to improve your chances of remembering. Place them in your briefcase, the office, at school. Fits easily in your car, boat, even your RV. So easy to use, even a child can use it. Act now and we'll include special CoCo Fest reminder magnets. Display CoCo Fest reminder rectangles on any metal surface. Use on I-beams, girders, vehicle parts, even your refrigerator or freezer. Other reminder systems cost up to 5 times more than CoCo Fest Reminder. Don't spend agonizing hours flipping through calendars, trying to make entries on a computer, or getting lost in all of those apps on your smartphone. Simplify your life and make it to CoCo Fest. Each CoCo Fest reminder includes 10 8.5 by 11 rectangles and 1 CoCo Fest reminder stylus. Plus, we'll include 4 CoCo Fest reminder magnets absolutely free. And through this one-time special podcast offer, you can get the CoCo Fest reminder for just $9.99. Call now and we'll send you a second CoCo Fest reminder absolutely free. You just pay the shipping and handling. That's right, you get 2 complete CoCo Fest reminders with rectangles, stylus, and magnets for just $9.99. Never forget CoCo Fest, April 22nd and 23rd in Lombard, Illinois. Don't forget to call now. To get 2 CoCo Fest reminder kits, call 1-800-6809 or send check or money order for $9.99 plus $19 shipping and handling to the CoCo Fest reminder offer 2Z7 Elm Tree, Ontario, Canada. CoCo Fest Reminder is not affiliated with CoCo Fest.
Okay, CoCo Cruisers, now it's time to hear a little feedback from you. First item, this month's feedback comes from L. Curtis Boyle. It says, love the interview with Mark. That's Mark Siegel, who we interviewed last episode. But the one burning question that should have been asked, what were the sales figures of the CoCos over its lifetime? So, yeah, we probably could have asked that. I think there's a couple of other people have mentioned questions that might could have been asked or should have been asked. maybe some of them we could have Mark back again. I think he was. I think he'd be primed to talk again at some point. So we may have to just collect up some of these questions. Mark Siegel Part 2. I think the disadvantage is we actually kind of have interacted enough with Mark that we already kind of knew the answers to some things, and so kind of unconsciously avoided some questions that we already knew the answers to, or new answers that might not be satisfactory. And so this is one of them. There seems to be some sort of gentleman's agreement or whatever amongst some of the old Tandy folks that they're just not going to discuss the details of the sales numbers. I don't know why. I don't know what's at stake or whose ox would be gored or whatever. But they just don't want to give up real numbers. We've kind of, I think Boise at one point got an estimate of a roughly 2 million number. I think he put that in his book, the Underdog book. But that's pretty well known in the community anyway. So I think that's the best number we've got right now. We did have a link episode or two ago about the German tank theorem, which I think actually provided the silver estimate to about 2 million anyway. So kind of right on there. But anyway, it's best we got. Like I said, we're entertaining the idea of maybe having Mark back again, and so we'll try to collect some better questions or more thought out questions for them. Anyway, thanks Curtis for the write-in, for the feedback. It's always good to hear from you. All right, the next one we heard is from Paul Fiscarelli. Wasn't familiar with Paul. Don't really know him. You guys, either of you guys know Paul?
No, I don't.
No. Well, so he sends a pretty lengthy feedback, and I don't know. But the biggest suggestion or whatever he had in there is, have you thought of creating a separate Q&A portion of the podcast? And say, I don't know that we have. Have you guys thought about would a Q&A section work for the podcast? I'm not sure if it would or not. I know Paul had a number of questions that he included. I think mostly we just have tried to respond to questions that have been posed or whatever. But I don't know. I don't know. We really had done a lot of.
I think
anyway, some of the questions that he proposed.
We've thought about it, but it's a long time to wait for an answer when you can get instantaneous responses on Facebook and CoCo lists. But
yeah, I think that's where we kind of grew out of.
Yeah, but I guess if you've got a question you want to submit to us, feel free to contact us on one of our email addresses, and we'll do our best.
Yeah. So you did send in a couple of questions. I think you're right. I think we kind of grew out of the mailing list and the Facebook access, and so asking questions, those other medium probably lend themselves better to asking questions than a podcast. But there might be some questions that need a longer form answer. Yes, he has some in his email. He says, "What's the story behind the '86 version of the Gimme chip versus the '87?" He has another one. What are the CoCo 3 and our CoCo 1, 2 purists, those who choose the native platform versus emulators, are using to code their programs? He has a question that pertains to Boise and Bill's book. Will there be another version? That's one you probably have to ask Boise or Bill. So I don't know. He's got a few questions in here. We may revisit some of these in later podcasts. But I don't know, the Q&A style thing, similar to like the old magazines, like Rainbow or whatever, might have a section where you write in a few questions and get answers in another issue or whatever. I don't know if Rainbow had that or not, honestly, but some magazines of the time had them. Some still do, I guess, Nuts and Bolts or whatever. But Oh, we might could do something like that, but honestly, I think probably the podcast is long enough. Yes, it is.
Very true. Very true.
So I don't know. Like I said, if you have a question that's not being answered, do feel free to send us in something. But I think probably by the time you send an email, you're probably better off sending it to the CoCo mailing list or getting on Facebook and asking a question there. You'll probably get a more timely answer in that case. But anyway, we do appreciate your feedback and would love to hear from you again, Paul, Curtis, Bill, Tim, or George, or whoever you are out there that was thinking about writing in but didn't. Feel free to do so next month. And like I said, keep the letters coming. Feedback at cococrew.org or one of the other mailing addresses as we mentioned in the announcements at the beginning of the program. Anyway, that's our feedback section for this month. I think we're going to be back in a minute with a host discussion, and then we'll be on with the rest of the show.
The amazing A-Bus from Alpha Products. A-Bus connects your computer to the real world. Simply plug in an A-Bus adapter to your color computer, Apple II, TRS-80, or PCXT compatible computer. Then add any combination of A-Bus I/O adapter cards. The A-Bus adapter allows the connection of 1 or 2 A-Bus I/O adapter cards. Or attach A-Bus motherboards that hold up to 5 A-Bus I/O adapter cards. Interconnect up to 5 A-Bus motherboards for an amazing total of up to 25 A-Bus I/O adapter cards. Use A-Bus cards to control, monitor, sense, and automate your world. A-Bus I/O adapter cards are easy to use with any programming language that can read or write to a memory address. From basic, use peek and poke or input and output commands to communicate with A-Bus I/O adapter cards. Each A-Bus I/O adapter card has a unique A-Bus address, easily set with onboard jumpers. Mix and match up to 25 A-Bus I/O adapter cards to fit your specific application. Choose from 10 different A-Bus I/O adapter cards: relay card, read relay card, analog input card, 12-bit analog to digital card, digital input card, 24-line TTL I/O card, clock with alarm card, touch tone decoder card, smart stepper controller card, stepper motor driver card, or create your own custom I/O adapter using an A-Bus prototyping card. The possibilities are endless. The amazing A-Bus from Alpha Products. Plug into the future. The A-Bus is not a replacement for a multi-pack interface. A-Bus cards are shipped with power supply and detailed manuals. Overseas orders add 10%.
All right. Welcome back for our host discussion. For this month's host discussion, we've decided we're actually kind of borrowing a topic that appeared on our kind of cousin podcast or sister podcast or whatever it is, the TRS-80 Trash Talk. They had a segment where they talked about a kind of a forecast for 2017, kind of what's the year ahead, what does it hold for retro computing or Tandy computing or in this case color computing, whatever. So I thought we'd take a swipe at it and see what we could come up with as well. Certainly one thing that we're all looking forward to in a few months is CoCo Fest, the 26th annual last Chicago CoCo Fest. Hopefully it still won't be the last, but and then we've got another event we've got our hands in coming in October. But before we get to that, what else is going on? Neil, will you ever run out of your joypad adapters?
Well, that is a worry. As the PCB boards run down, I have to do another run of them. But yeah. I do have a nice stock. I'm just working on it now. Now I'm back on the DIN side, so those DIN connectors, they're they can be brutal.
That's the most fun part.
I just have a good feeling this is going to be the year of projects. I mean, not that 2016 wasn't, but I got good vibes that 2017 will be. I know a couple of games that are in development. Hopefully they see the light of day. They're not just vaporware. And looking forward to it.
Always good to hear.
Yeah.
One of the games I think it's safe to mention, John Strong's been sending me a couple pictures and updates here and there. John, if you're listening, sorry I don't always get back to you on the email. Just been pretty busy since coming off the holidays there. But he's sending me updates of he's doing a Wreck-It Ralph game and it's
Right.
looking really nice. The graphics are looking nice. It's a CoCo 3 game, so hopefully that does come out.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, I know I've recently got my fingers back into some CoCo 3 programming. The only real CoCo 3 project I've done before was the video player, which is a cool project, but is kind of, quite a bit different from writing a game or whatever. You have to load yourself off of the disk or whatever media you've got, and you've got to do a lot more management of memory and stuff. And, the CoCo 3 graphics screens are big enough that, you basically have to use the MMU to swap in your code versus your graphics just to be able to access the full graphics pages. So it's a little different. Been messing around there. I don't know what I'll come up with. I mean, I hope to have things to demo at CoCo Fest and later at Tandy Assembly. I don't know at what point I'll get to be a done game. It does feel like the CoCo 3 is going to take a kind of a bigger effort, not just the coding, but just to take a useful advantage of the graphics to make things look nice. It's probably going to stretch my artistic skills a little bit. So,
And also, I'm looking for use of the joypad adapter. If you get that game off the ground, that'll be neat. The first one.
Yeah, I'm tempted to do kind of a mini game that makes use of the adapter and at least looks decent or does some cool stuff, but maybe isn't a full blown thing. And just kind of as the game itself in a way would be like a preview or or whatever, but something that actually makes use of that adapter. I mean, I think that's something we really are missing. I think people don't get the full usefulness of that adapter because, even though I've published how to access those other buttons, it still seems to kind of escape people in terms of they don't really realize the usefulness of having extra buttons, I guess. And hardware-wise, we actually should be able to make it use the 6-button Sega controllers. I just have never actually gotten it to, worked it out to do it. Maybe at some point we'll figure out the 6 buttons and we can put in a fighting game.
That'd be awesome.
Interesting to see what people announce at CoCo Fest this year, because we have had a lot of interesting hardware developments over the last year, and that's what we're still lagging behind on is software to drive all these new cool hardware things that we have there.
I think that is something that has been missing, and we have people who work on hardware, we have people who work on software. We don't have a lot of people who work together, especially across those lines. And so, like you say, we can get some pretty cool software or pretty cool hardware developments that then have no software that takes advantage of them. Quite often, they're cool hardware, but they're done in ways that makes hardware difficult. Makes it difficult for software to take advantage of them. So then you need an even more talented programmer to make use of them. It would be good in some ways if we could get more team ups within the community. We have some team ups. I know, the Bouncy Ball crew has been working on stuff, and Simon's been getting more deeply involved in some of that with was it Lee Patterson?
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. If anybody's likely to have something at CoCo Fest, it'll be Lee.
So that should be cool to see. I don't know. It's one of those things that it's. I always kind of got a few projects that I've worked on and then didn't quite finish or kind of just set back for a while. I've got a C compiler project that I kind of have set back, and I don't know. Then I kind of didn't work on it much just because I didn't want to go head to head with CMOC. I wanted to see where that came out. That still seems to advance stuff, but I don't know. At some point, I may get back to my C compiler project. We'll see where that goes. I don't know if that'll be this year or not, but so my C compiler, it's really a port of the Bruce Evans C compiler, BCC. It isn't quite there, but it has support for position independent code and such, so that it could theoretically support building for OS 9. it actually can build for OS 9 now. It just I have the linkers mark it so that it marks the executable so that it's not shared. So you can run the program under OS 9, but you don't get the full advantage of being able to multitask it or whatever. I don't know. What other things you think are happening? What about Tandy Assembly? Are we excited about that? I know we're excited about it. How do you think that's going to change how do you think that'll change the face of the community?
Well, I think it's definitely going to help bring different people out because of the different geographical location. That's going to help for one thing. And then opening the doors of all the Tandy computers, even the pocket computers, it should get a wide audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good mix of people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know as a CoCo guy, I always had at least a tangential interest in, the Z80 line and in the Tandy 1000 line. I can't help but think that the people on the other side may have had at least a tangential interest in the CoCo and the MC10 as well. And so just because you're focused on one or the other, maybe if you have an excuse to kind of cross the line, maybe that'll help a few people do so. So we may all end up with a bigger Z80 collection. Hopefully some of those guys will end up with bigger CoCo collections, and maybe we'll get bigger communities as a result. That'll be good, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think the thing I like too, I mean, we're all geared up for CoCo Fest, and it's an awesome event, and everybody should come to it. But it's kind of neat. It feels like there's a second chance. If you miss that one, Tandy Assembly is just 6 months away from that, and hopefully we'll get into a good cycle there. So you won't have to wait a whole year to attend an event.
And also on that note, for people that get CoCo Fest blues, after CoCo Fest, I know I certainly do. It gives you also something else to look forward to. So even if you didn't miss CoCo Fest and you did go to CoCo Fest, you do have another event to look forward to in that same year. So
yeah, and even project wise, if you didn't quite get something ready for CoCo Fest, you're not going to have to wait an entire year to show it somewhere. You can keep working on it and target Tandy Assembly for your breakout demo. So
that's great.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that may change the dynamics a little bit of the project building. Like you say, it's not the one deadline that you miss it and you just you got to wait till next year. At least we have something a few months away. I don't know. I think that'd be cool. Well, what else? What else is going to be? What are we doing to make the CoCo great again?
Well, we definitely have all these different sound cards and sound projects going on, and different players. I think there's another video project that's in the works. So, I guess it's going to be. We can look for some different multimedia stuff here. That's
true. Yeah, there's a lot of work on sound outputs. I think. Some of them are designed to be kind of standalone-ish or maybe, something to plug in and leave in your MPI or whatever. The card I'm working on, I actually have an intent of hoping to just use them in kind of super program packs where the sound chip goes along with the program pack. I think that's a cool idea. It doesn't add that much cost to the program pack, so
yeah, definitely is because not everybody has a multi-pack. So
yeah, there might be more of them now. Now that Ed's got his mini MPI out, I guess, but
that helps.
A lot of people don't have multi-packs. A lot of people that do have them don't really like them. So,
yeah, right. And I think the other idea that's interesting of putting it on a pack is that you're not constricted with behaving or playing well with other cartridges like you do have to in an MPI. So you can pretty much put it on your pack and do whatever you want.
Yeah, well, it simplifies the design, so the hardware doesn't have to worry about SLIN B or whatever. You don't have to pick,
right.
you you don't have to worry about what address you're using as long as it doesn't conflict with your own self. You're fine. And not that this is very likely, but if you happen to run out of one kind of sound chip and can't get them anymore, then you could still produce, if you could get similar sound out of a different chip, you could just switch chips, right? And that's a more practical concern with a current modern kind of platform, but it could hit us, right? You could become difficult to find sound chips all of a sudden, and yet there might be a variant that you could still use. It's a lot easier to switch them that way. But anyway, I think that's a cool project. Except we may go into more detail on that in the tech segment. Yeah, maybe that's what 2017 should be about, is figuring how to consolidate our hardware developments with our software developments. We should all aspire to work together and some better projects out of the combination.
I'll tell you what, it would be neat to see little snippets of example, demo code from more of the hardware stuff that's out there. I really like what you did when you posted the code for your receipt printer. And it doesn't have to be anything big and exotic, but it gives you a clear understanding of what's required.
Well, that's the thing, that you run a risk when you publish any of that stuff. There's some people who love it and eat it up and ask for more, and some people who will loudly complain about how they don't know assembly and don't want to read it. And how dare you muddy the waters with that stuff.
Well, I know for me, you can understand. I mean, the assembler talking to the processor is one thing. You can grasp that pretty quickly. But a lot of times it's just, the style or seeing some sample code to get started, because there's so many bits and pieces. Kind of a template to start from, I guess, is helpful. Well,
maybe we should do more blogging in 2017 then too, huh? Well, not just me, not just us, but all the listeners too. I'd love to see Simon do some more blogging. He shares a lot of code, but sometimes it's a little hard to put it into context because it's just code and no words. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I've always enjoyed reading blogs because I don't assembly code that well, but it does help to read along with a detailed blog.
Well, then there's, we've got the end of now the Popstar Pilot blog. I assume we're not going to get any more updates there. That one was out for 4 years, and Nick was updating that one.
Yeah.
So someone needs to start a new long-term project blog, so we can overcome our withdrawal from that. Well, anyway, I think that's probably we've solved all the problems of the world and predicted what the future of 2017. It should hold more combination hardware and software projects. There should be more collaboration between CoCo developers, both hardware and software. And we should all write more about it and presumably read more about it, and so that we all can get that warm, fuzzy participation feeling. So that would make for a pretty good 2017. Oh, and we need to show up at CoCo Fest to talk about it and plan for Tandy Assembly, and then show up at Tandy Assembly to talk about what happened over the summer and plan for the next CoCo Fest, and so on and so on and so on, right?
Absolutely.
Sounds like a plan. All right. Well, I guess that's probably enough. We can wrap this up. And we'll now return you to your normally scheduled CoCo Fest or CoCo Crew podcast.
You're only young once, but you can be retro forever. A single spark of imagination can ignite the flame of the extraordinary.
Introducing Tandy Assembly, the first gathering completely dedicated to Radio Shack and Tandy computer enthusiasts.
Extraordinary.
Recapture the excitement of the early days of Radio Shack microcomputing. Relive the Tandy evolution of MS-DOS compatible systems. Meet people who continue to support and expand these retro computer systems. New products, new software, new ideas.
A single spark of imagination.
From Pocket Computer to Tandy 6000. From Z80 to 486.
You're only young once.
We're not finished rediscovering our most beloved computers. Join us at Tandy Assembly.
Retro forever.
Something new is coming. October 2017. Tandy Assembly.
Okay, welcome back to this month's tech segment. This, of course, is John Linville, and I'm going to take a little bit of a diversion from our normal format, and just going to talk about a project that I've been working on a little bit lately. The project is, it's a prototype that I built up just to plug my proto boards for the CoCo port that I designed and that are available for sale from our guest host Mike Rowan. And I think I've made the design files available to a few other people who might be able to produce them. Anyway, used my proto board and built up a little audio card so that, the idea is to prove that the chip works and that I can, build a circuit with it, but that I could do so cheaply enough that you could actually produce CoCo game carts that have built-in audio hardware. And, the prototype looks pretty good, so I think I've at least proved the concept. So what is it? The audio chip that I've included in there is it's an SN76489 AN chip. That's a Texas Instruments chip. I guess they call it a digital complex sound generator. The chip has 3 square wave tone generators. You can set them at 16 different volume levels. It also has 1 noise generator, which can produce either what they call white noise or what they call periodic noise. You can set the frequencies. So there's some fixed frequencies, plus you could tie it to the frequency of one of the tone generators. Also 16 different volume levels for the noise. Anyway, in some ways it's similar to a lot of other chips that make noise. Kind of like the even the SID or the AY3 8910 or the Atari Pokey, but it's probably not as nice as any of those in terms of you have no control over the waveforms. You don't have any control really over the envelopes unless you kind of manually bump the volume yourself to form an envelope. It's nicer than having to service the sound hardware with the CPU, but it's not the nicest chip available. But again, you're talking about a chip that can probably add to it to a CoCo cartridge for roughly $5 additional cost on what you'd call the BOM cost or the bill of materials cost. It makes a nice bonus. The chip, of course, it takes advantage of the one audio input line on the CoCo's 40-pin cartridge connector. Interfacing to that line from the chip is nearly trivial. If you look for circuits where people have experimented with this chip using the Arduino or whatever else, you'll see that there's just one line out, and people have actually, it sounds like some of the experimenters have basically hung headphone jacks just right off of that one line. It's probably not the ideal circuit, but it can drive quite a lot of stuff. In this case, I've just got, currently I'm just using I think it's 10 microfarad capacitor to do the AC coupling into the audio mixer for the CoCo. I'm not a big analog electronics guy. I was trained as a computer engineer, so kind of kept my head down through some of the analog stuff when maybe I should have been listening better. I'm thinking that there's a resistor that I could add in the path that might actually improve it with where it produces a little bit higher volume. I haven't quite got there yet because I've still been experimenting with programming the chip. But anyway, as it stands, like I said, this is designed to be put on, or the idea is to put it on a CoCo cartridge, and so you plug in and the cartridge would be there and you'd automatically have your audio hardware. And so the simplest way to address the chip in something like that is just to use basically the SCS chip select, the spare chip select there. Now this is the chip select that's normally used to trigger the floppy drive hardware. So as I've built my prototype, it is incompatible with any floppy drive hardware, which presumably would include the CoCo STC as well. If we are actually going to build a standalone sound chip, that's something that would compete with the Orchestra 90 or the speech sound pack or Ed Snyder's PSG card or whatever, then you'd at least have to add some extra circuitry to decode a different address, which means picking a different address or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe if people are really interested in a standalone version of the card, we could do something like that. But like I said, for now, the idea is for me to produce something that I can put on a ROM cartridge, and that way your program automatically knows it has the audio hardware available. The circuits to implement or to interface the chips are actually pretty simple. They're basically just 8 data lines, and there's a select that basically you tie into SCS. It's a little more complicated than that, but probably not worth going into it over what amounts to a radio program. But anyway, eventually I'll probably blog about this and publish a schematic. If you're waiting with bated breath, well, you probably just have to wait, but I will entertain a certain amount of pleading if you just can't hold it back. Anyway, that's all in good fun, of course. In terms of programming the chip, the access is actually kind of neat. There's one address, 1 byte that you write to, and depending on the format of that byte, it changes, which tone generator or which noise, or whether it's the noise source or the tone generators you're updating, or even, the frequency updates for the tone generators are 2 bytes, so you have to write 2 different values, and it just knows when you've written the second value. Now you have to write them in order, I guess. That is one neat thing, though. If you have tones that are close together, instead of writing multiple 16-bit values, you could write just the most significant 8 bits, and then you can, it's really the 8-bit value that selects the tone generator and the most significant bits of the frequency, and then you can write the lower bits of the frequency as updates, and without having to write the top part, if you follow me. So instead of 2 bytes for the first frequency update, if the change isn't too big, you can just write 1 byte for the next update, and continue to do that, so that you could have like a slide whistle sort of effect. It's pretty easy to program these values. Like I said, there's 3 noise generators or tone generators and a noise generator. You just write the 8-bit register values out to them, and it's not really a big deal. It responds pretty well. There's the only thing right now, each write needs a certain number of cycles from the chip has an external clock that's a 4 megahertz clock, and it needs 32 cycles from that clock for any register update to happen. So if you're on a CoCo 2 or even a CoCo 1, but operating at the low speed mode, CoCo 3 operating at the low speed mode, Either of those cases, the register update should be no big deal. If you happen to be operating with the high-speed mode, you may have to introduce some no-ops during the write, because if you write too quickly, you'll actually lose the values, and so your sound won't be right. But anyway, even then, it's a lot less service than, say, having to service either the DAC or even the 1-bit tone or noise source or whatever, the beeper that's available on the CoCo. Yeah, so what else to say about this? The chips seem to be pretty handily available. They're not very expensive. I think they can fit in the budget of a CoCo ROM pack. We need a game with some music in it. I'm considering, at least as a demo, rejiggering some of the music for Farfall and at least having that as a demo available at CoCo Fest. Depends on how successful that conversion would be as to whether or not there'd be any for sale. I suspect some people are probably tired of hearing about Farfall. So I don't know how many would actually sell anyway, but I guess you never know. It does sound pretty good. I think it sounds cool. And like I say, it's a nice way to add the audio to the CoCo. I know I've heard from at least one other, shall we say, prominent game developer on the CoCo that he would like to be able to use a circuit like that for his games as well. See, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but this chip was used in a number of other contemporary computers and game systems from back in the day. That would include several arcade games, including Ladybug and Mr. Do, Time Pilot. It was used on the BBC Micro. It was used on the ColecoVision and the Coleco Atom, Sega Master System, the Game Gear as well. Notably, not exactly the chip, but a clone of the chip was used in the Tandy 1000s and the PC Juniors. So, if that helps you envision what the sound is. So anyway, it's a cool and cheap, effective way to add sound to CoCo games. Probably could produce a production sound card as a standalone sound card for this. You probably could sell them for $20 or less. As an add-on to a ROM pack, you're probably talking even less. Like I said, $5 cost addition. It's a pretty cool thing. Well, honestly, that's pretty much all I've got. Anyway, it's a cool project. I'm still working with it, figuring out my tools for converting audio and stuff. Oh, I should mention, there is a source of audio for these things that is called, it's a VGM file, for video game music file. And there's plenty of these out on the web. The VGM format actually covers more than one type of chip, but beyond that, it's similar to some other formats where it's basically a register dump of timed register writes to the chips. If you find VGM format files, you have to make sure that they're actually for the chip that you're using. In this case, again, the Texas Instruments SN76489AN, or perhaps a compatible chip. But you can find them, like I said, is used in the BBC Micro. So there's some demo scene kind of stuff for the BBC Micro out there that has music that is compatible with the chips. So I found some of those files and wrote a little player. There's a converter out there that will convert those files to something a little more easily processed. And I grabbed that. Maybe I'll put a link in the show notes to that. And wrote a simple player that just times them out and will play the music. And that's what I use for the YouTube video I posted on the Facebook group. But for those that didn't get a chance to see that, I'll maybe try to close out with a sample of that music. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it on the speakers or the microphone on the laptop here, and if not, then maybe I'll have Neil rip the music and include it in the playback. But I'll let Neil judge that as he's doing the editing. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and let that play. It's only a minute or so. It's well, here it is. This is what it sounds like. See if you think you'd like a CoCo games would sound like this. So that was a little tune called Chilled Out Princess. It's this VGM file. I'm sure you can find it on the web if you really want to. The point being to let you hear how the music sounds coming out of my SN76489AN sound chip or sound card for the CoCo. Like I said, a pretty simple chip. It's or a pretty simple device to interface to the CoCo. Probably do a blog post eventually. Hadn't got there yet. Still playing with the card. Anyway, that is your text segment for January 2017 on the CoCo Crew Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. Feel free to send me some feedback. Feedback at cococrew.org, or of course John at cococrew.org. Let me know what you think. All right, well, enjoy CoCo forever. Be retro forever. Bye.
CoCo. I'm in love with the CoCo. Fruity Pebbles, that's a no-no. Yeah, I'm in love with the CoCo. Captain Crunch, that's a no-no. Yeah, I'm in love with the CoCo. Yeah, I'm in love with the CoCo. I'm in love with the CoCo.
Back to more retro goodness with the CoCo Crew.
Okay, welcome CoCo Cruisers. We have a real treat this episode. We have a real live interview with an actual CoCo programmer from back in the day. We're going to be talking to Rick Adams, who is known as the author of Temple of Rom and Shanghai, as well as a few other pieces of software here and there. And Rick's going to hopefully give us some insight into what it was like being a game programmer back in the day, working with Tandy and, getting to know famous luminaries of the world like Steve Bjork and other things like that. Of course, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mike Rowan and Neil Blanchard, so they'll be joining in as well. But anyway, just to start things off, Rick, if you want to introduce yourself to the podcast, maybe tell us something about your background and how you got involved with computing back in the day.
Okay, well, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, myself and Jim Issel, who later was a writer for Rainbow and magazine, and Paul Lear and Dale Lear, they were brothers that worked for this company that we all worked for in California, and it was like a programming. We were all programmers, and that was back in the days when people were talking about, well, what kind of the home computers were coming out, and there were all these different kinds, and what kind are you going to get? And so Dale and Paul and Jim all got color computers, and so I decided, well, I'm going to do that too. So we all had those, and we were all actually in a carpool together. And so every day we'd, commute about 45 minutes to an hour into work. And Dale had a number of vehicles. We all had a number of vehicles, but the one that I liked the best, that was the craziest, was he had an antique milk truck. And we would all be in this antique milk truck and going to work. And just to tell you what kind of a guy that Dale is, we were all talking in this milk truck, grinding along, and the thing made just the most horrific noise. And we could barely hear each other think, let alone talk to each other. But one of us was talking about a rumor that he had heard that Bill Gates' full name, when converted to ASCII code and added together, added up to 666, thus proving that Bill Gates was the Antichrist. And I just said, well, that's nonsense. And everybody else said, yeah, that's nonsense. And Dale said, let's add it up. Well, at the time, we didn't have, calculators. This was back in the days when we didn't have calculators. We had them at home. It's like, for me, I'm like, yeah, let's add it up. Let's go home, and I'll go get my calculator, and I'll add it up. No, he wanted to do it right then. So we assigned, one of us was the hundreds place, one of us was the tens place, and one of us was the units place, and then we, formed a little calculator in this milk truck, and we added it all up, and we found out that it was not true. It did not add up. We tried many different ways. What if it's Bill versus William? And no, it did not add up to 666. So we proved that Bill Gates was not the Antichrist. So
proof at last.
so Dale took a look at the state of how the games for the color computer at that time, and then that was back in the days when you had such winning hits such as Dino Wars, and. Dale looked at that and he said, I think I can do better than that. So he had some really strong ideas about what sorts of games should be done. At the time, it was really big to clone an arcade game. So you'd, come up with your own version of Donkey Kong or Defender or something like that. And we spent a lot of times, at noontime at the arcades too. But Dale thought that we should do an original game. So he did Double Back, and he sent it into Tandy, and he wanted to make sure that he got Tandy's attention. So he wanted to program it onto a ROM that was in an actual program pack. So he says, well, which one of my games for my color computer can I, gut out and not miss that game? And it's like Dino Wars was the winner. So he took the ROM out of a Dino Wars cartridge, and he put in his own ROM, EEPROM, with Double Back in it, and he sent it in to Mark Siegel. And Mark Siegel said, yes, we'll take that. Thank you very much. And so I said, well, wow, I should try doing that too. So I had gotten my color computer by then, and I had my my cassette tape recorder to store source code onto, and an Edit-A-Sem Plus cartridge. So I was all set up to do some heavy programming. So basically, Temple of Rom, as it grew, it was written to cassette tape. And eventually it got large enough that it got written to 20 minutes worth of a cassette tape. And then it was too big for one tape. So I did it. If you look at the structure of, if you ever disassemble Temple of Rom and look at how it's structured, it's got a very, very weird structure. It's in 3 large pieces that have pointers to the other segments. So, and those correspond to 3 20-minute audio cassettes. And so,
wow.
So if I needed to make a change to the program, I would decide, okay, well, the changes I want to make today are on this 20-minute cassette. And so I would read it in. Well, that's 20 minutes right there. And I'd make some changes. And then I'd test them. And if I liked what it did, then I would write them back out. And that's another 20 minutes. The only problem was that the color computer that I had at that time had thermal problems. So if the tape was writing out, and about 15 minutes into writing the tape out, suddenly the power supply went, then that was it. So needless to say, I kept meticulous backups on all of these cassettes. It was just an amazing collection.
Wow.
And people would tell me, get a floppy drive, for crying out loud. And I said, well, floppy drives are really expensive. They're like $400. And they said, it doesn't matter. Just buy it. You'll never understand how you live without it once you buy one. I said, well, which one of my 3 children do I not feed in order to buy this thing? So I lived with my cassette tapes. And and when I was writing them out, or when I was reading them in, and all of a sudden the video would start to fuzz out a little bit, meaning that the power supply was about to go because something thermally related was about to die. Well, of course, like any self-respecting geek, the top cover of the computer just came right off because the screws weren't in it anymore because I'd been opening it up and fiddling with it. So I would just pull that off real quick, and a can of Freon, and I would go into the power supply, and it would turn into a little ice sculpture, and then that would stabilize it long enough to write the rest of the tape out. Wow. Well, that worked real good. Until one day, just started to fuzz out, and I whipped off the cover real quick, grabbed the old crusty old can of Freon, and went to spray, and it went, nothing there. And I'm like, no. So I leaned way down right on top of the power supply and started blowing into it with my own breath, just, and I kept this up, and you could hear, it would click each block of the tape. The little relay would go click, 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 and I'm sitting there just blowing into it for all I'm worth. Little stars appearing in my vision as I'm about to black out. And finally, it gives a little double click at the end, I think, was what it did. You could tell from the sound of it, it was done. And then the motor would coast to a stop, and, it's like, all right, great. Well, before I do any more programming on this thing, I better go and get another can of Freon. So that was living the life back then.
Yeah.
So,
just for the record, nowadays, if you do come across a CoCo, about half the time they have all the screws out, and you can lift the top off anyway.
Oh, yeah.
that's sort of how they come nowadays.
Yeah. Especially at CoCo 1.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, CoCo Fest, you get one, and they almost certainly not have screws in them. It's almost like you have to pay extra for the screws.
Yeah, we should start selling them at the next CoCo Fest.
Now,
yeah.
So I sent that in. Did I send it in as? Yeah, I did. I assembled it onto a cassette tape, and I think I sent it in that way. I'm pretty sure that's what I did. Sent it off to Mark Siegel, and Dale had told me that it takes about 3 weeks for them to get back to you. So I sent it off, and then I wrote, day 1 on my calendar at work. So every day I would turn the leaf over, and I would take day 2, day 3. And I can tell from my notes that I even, it's like, okay, this is, it's day 3 of, 3 weeks, so that's 3 times 7, figure out the percentage. I was like, okay, this is, I'm 12% in, 13% in, 14.2% in, and then it really wasn't all that long. It's about maybe 1 or 2 weeks. And I get a call from Mark Siegel. He says, we'd like to buy this game. And I said, I would be fascinated if you bought this game. And he even said, he said, oh yeah, it's a beautiful game. And I was so shocked that he would say that. I said, could you say that again? He said, oh yeah, I said it was a beautiful game. I said, oh yeah. So I was pretty happy about that. And let's see. So, but he also said, I had called it Temple of Ram, And the ROM part was, it was a joke because it was like referring to the fact that it was programmed onto a ROM. So just for fun, I called it Temple of Rom. So he says, "Yeah, I don't like the name of it though. We got to change the name." And I said, "Hey, look, you can change it to whatever you want. I'll change it." But he never thought of another name, so Temple of Rom it was. So in Temple of Rom, there's that little no-clip sheet that a lot of people know about. If you hold down the fire button long enough, you can pass through walls. And that sounds really cool, but really it doesn't really help you any. I thought about, outside of, it's got this big maze that's like it's more than 9 screens worth, actually. It was basically diagrammed out on 9 pieces of grid paper taped together. And theoretically, I have that someplace in my house, along with my unreleased game that I've never been able to find. Somewhere in the Precambrian layer of the historical dig that is the bottom of my house. But I don't know. I've never been able to find it. So, was somebody going to say something? Okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
No, I do. I was going to ask the button press and the walls in Temple of Rom. Was that intentional, or is that something kind of a bug you discovered and left in as a feature?
No, I did that on purpose, and the reason was I wanted it to have some kind of an Easter egg, just so I could play it, in a Radio Shack store, and say, "Now watch this," and just to prove, cool. And I could say, well, the reason I knew about that is because I'm the guy who programmed that, And when it did, cool. When it finally showed up in Radio Shacks, I did make quite a nuisance of myself, going from Radio Shack to Radio Shack and going, I programmed that. I was going to do, I was going to have something outside of the maze. Like if you went through the walls, I was going to come outside of the maze, and there's going to be something you could find out there, like a little drawing of a McDonald's or something. But I never got around to it. So.
That's cool.
Yeah, you were talking about drawing it. There's a really nice map of all the screens on
I saw that.
Curtis
Yeah.
Boyle's website. Yeah, it's very nice.
I saw that, and somebody also figured out where all the treasures were and added those to the map. That was really great. And then somebody was working on a 3D version of the game for a while, but he sort of seems to have dropped it. I think he's been busy doing other things. So,
real life interferes, I guess.
I'm sorry, what?
I said real life interferes, I guess.
Yes, it does. Doesn't it just?
Yeah.
So I finished that and got that sold, and then Dale was working on Color Baseball and Firecopter and TS Edit and all that stuff. He's really, one of the main, programmers. I just did like a couple of games, but I was ecstatic to do that much. That was so much fun. Learning about, the color computer is a machine that you can really wrap your head around. I remember learning about all the little, what is it called? It's like the hooks in lower memory, where the basic ROMs would call subroutines in memory that were just return statements. And so you could put your own vector there and divert it to your own code and then have it go back. And you could make your own mods to the basic ROMs that way, basically. And boy, I had a lot of fun doing that.
We actually had a tech segment on that a couple of months back where I added support for a printer that needed an additional line feed with its carriage returns to function properly. And so we listeners should be familiar with exactly what you're talking about there.
Oh yeah, that was just such a revelation for me. It was just so much fun to be able to play with that. I remember one time I did a like an RS-232 driver, so that I could log into something or other, probably OS9 or something. Probably not OS9 actually. I just wanted. I think I had just Color Basic show up on a terminal, an external terminal, and I couldn't figure out where do I have room to put this driver. Well, I'll just put it on the on-screen. I'm not going to be using the screen anymore, so I'll just take the screen buffer and just put it in the middle of that. Well, that lasted just long enough for me to do the next load M, which clears the screen, and well, that was the end of the driver.
Oh, that's funny.
So Temple of Rom sold really well, and I got some money out of it. And it took a lot of, I had the computer was in a back room, and my wife wasn't real happy with, I was spending all my time back in this back room. And then she got the first check from Temple of Rom. And she says, why don't you go in that back room and see what you can do something else?
That's cool.
So eventually, that was after a while, Activision wanted somebody to do the color computer port of Shanghai. And so I guess Tandy must have suggested my name because they called me up. And so I got to go down to Activision headquarters and arrange that. And that was kind of fun. The Color Computer 3 had just come out at the time, I think, because they had me. Mm-hmm. They weren't really sure whether they wanted to do things for the Color Computer 3, so they wanted me to bring one down and show them what it looked like. And so I brought it down, and it was, just for fun. I was playing a number of things, like, Temple of Rom and things like that. But one of the things I had up was somebody's bouncing ball demo. And I can't remember whose it was. Probably it was the one by Sockmaster.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly, though. But I had it up and running. And one of their programmers came by and was asking, my soon-to-be future boss a question. And then he looked over and said, oh, yeah, the Amiga bouncing ball demo. Yeah. Like, I've seen it all before. and my soon-to-be manager said, guess again. That's a color computer. He says, that's a color computer? He says, I didn't know we were doing things for color computers. And she said, well, we are now.
That's cool.
So I worked on Shanghai, and all the time I was working on Shanghai, it had a particular color set that they had set up for me. And the idea was that it's a Mahjong game, and so what's on the screen is supposed to be ivory tiles, and they have a little bit of yellowing on the edges, because when Mahjong tiles get old, they start yellowing around the edges, so they wanted it to look like that. And I think the Amiga version did that. So all during testing, it looked like that, but then at the last moment, at the very, very end of testing, they decided, we want it to have a different color set. So they gave it some other color set. And I couldn't stand it. I didn't like it. So I thought to myself, well, when I play this game, I want it to have my color set that I liked. So that was when I put the little tiny invisible dot on the title screen, where if you click on it, it says you can have an RGB color set, or you can have a composite color set, or you can have Rick's color set, which was just like a little invisible dot that was in the middle of nowhere. It's really hard to find. It's deliberately hard to find, because at the time I was just terrified that Activision would find it and they would be mad, So I made it hard to find, but but I knew how to find it, and that was all I needed.
Awesome.
But you can find it if you look around. It's sort of on the left of the screen. It's sort of about 2/3 up, and it's not, there's nothing you can point to that you can say, click on the N or something like that. It's just in the middle of, space. So
I found it when you posted that. I tried and I got it. It's a nice color set, actually.
Yeah. Marty Goodman published a guide at one point on how to find it. It's like, you go to the particular letter in the title screen, and then you go, 2 jumps over and 3 jumps down or something like that. And then there's the dot.
Your staggered roll.
So I was telling.
Cool.
So I was mentioning earlier
John.
that the Don hack, yes.
Yeah.
I left a little message, and there was this guy named Don Hutchinson, and we were on like Delphi at the time, and so we knew him, and he had a lot of fun disassembling all our games, Dale's games and my games and various other people's. So just for fun, I left a little ASCII message at the end of the ROM data that said, "Hello, Don. Good to see you again." And then, so at the end of the testing at Activision, all of a sudden I got a call one day at work from this guy at Activision, who's the guy who's burning the ROMs for the first production run of the cartridge. And he had spotted that data, and he wanted to ask me about it because his name was Don, and he was really spooked. It's like, how did you know? And it's like, well, no, I didn't. I had to explain the whole thing to him. So he's like, what is this? What is this? So he was, so I had to convince him that I wasn't psychic.
And did that stay in the code?
Yes, it did. I believe it did.
Oh,
Unless
cool.
they stripped it out. That's a good question. You can go looking for it, see if it's there.
That's cool.
Let's see. So, another thing that got some people asking questions was when I did Delphi terminal program, which started out as Ricky Term, because the most popular color computer terminal program was Mikey Term by Mike Ward, I think it was. And so it was Mikey Term, so I did one, and so I called it Ricky Term, just, to keep with the theme, and then Delphi sort of bought it. They didn't pay me a whole lot for it. It was basically just favors and free time on Delphi and stuff like that. But near the end of Delphi Term is another message. At the time, there was a theory that the various, United States spy agencies and spooks and things were busily monitoring everything on the internet. Well, this actually later turned out to be true, but they were looking for certain keywords. So anything that looked interesting, then they would hone in on that and listen some more on that. So their automated programs couldn't, listen to everything, couldn't read everything on the internet because, just too big. So, you couldn't have a computer possibly do that. Well, now you could, but so it's like, well, what keywords is it listening for? And so people had a theory that, you could overload their programs by just making sure that, at the end of people's messages on Usenet, they would have what they called NSA food, which would be, AK-47, assassination, keyhole, all kinds of weird buzzwords. It was, half serious, half a joke. So there's a thing like that in Ricky Term or Delphi Term. So every once in a while somebody would go looking in and go, what is this? So they'd send me a message and ask me what was up with that.
Wow, that's cool.
And let's see. So, and then
how about the Last Ninja?
Yes, then came the Last Ninja. The thing is, people. I have 2 people now that are one that has already written a book and one is writing a book, who contacted me, and all they want to talk about is the Last Ninja because success has many fathers, failure is an orphan, but everyone loves a good train wreck. So The Last Ninja was, I believe it was originally on an Amiga, and they sent me an Amiga with the game on it for me to see it and to experience it, and, since I was going to be porting it. But they first offered it to Dale Lear, and Dale looked at the schedule and looked at the game and decided that that wasn't a good idea for him to do. Now, Dale's a pretty smart guy, and I think I would have been well served to emulate his example, but I did not. I looked at the schedule and I said, well, that's a crazy schedule. They had it like in 2 or 3 months or some crazy thing. And they didn't have any specification of the game. It's just like, here's the game on an Amiga. Look at the game. Play the game. And, it's like, well, I play the game, but, I get only so far before I die. And it's like, well, how many levels are there? How hard is it? What kinds of things are in these levels? They're not telling me that. They're expecting me to play the game through, and figure that out. And I don't know. But I thought, I'm young and strong, and I can tough this out. And the money looked really good. So they paid me $1,000 sign-up bonus, and that was the last money I saw from The Last Ninja. And happy to get that, really. I was actually able to buy, for the first time, a couple of floppy drives with that. Remember the floppy drives I couldn't afford because I'd have to starve one of my 3 children? Well, I finally got one.
Right.
Actually, I also got, I think by then, from Temple of Ram, I got enough money to buy floppy drives, and I think I actually went for a 40-megabyte hard disk. Can you believe it? 40 megabytes. I'll never fill that up.
Huge that.
So yeah. So to make a long story short, that was a disaster. The game was, way too complicated. Nothing specified. Too short of a time frame. And so when I worked on Shanghai, my manager there was this nice woman named Sherry. She was very nice to me and treated me really well. When my daughter was born, she sent flowers. I thought that was really nice. I had a special hotline to her desk, so if I wanted to ask her something, I could just call her right up and she'd answer it right away. So that was all great. So when they wanted Last Ninja, they said, let's have Rick do it. So she was really nice to me, and she said, if you find that you cannot finish this game on time, tell us as soon as you know, and we'll do our best to make sure that you're okay. So it got to the point where it's, I hate to admit this, but I am in over my head. I'm working every day until about 2 or 3 in the morning. I am exhausted. I am not in good shape, and I'm not going to finish this in time. And she told me to tell them. Well, it's time to tell them. So I called them up and told them, and they said, okay, and they arranged a meeting. And so I went down to the famous Activision headquarters, which I always got such a thrill every time I went in there because they had all their games on the wall as you went down the wall. Down the hall. And I really liked Activision because they did so many great games that I had played. So anyway, so they said, okay, come on down. We'll take care of it. And so I entered the room, and there is Steve Bjork. And they said, we have decided to give this game from you to another developer. And that would be Steve here. Steve was like, hi. I'm like, hi. And that was fine with me because it's like at that point, I was like, I want this game out of my life. I will do whatever it takes.
Did you know Steve previous to that? Or was that your first introduction? Okay.
Oh, no. I knew Steve, and I knew enough about Steve to know Steve. Now, here's the thing about Steve. There are people that don't like Steve. There are people that think he's a jerk. there are people who love Steve, and there are people who respect Steve, and there are people for whom all of these things are true. And that would probably describe me. I like Steve. Believe it or not, yes, I know. There are people who hate Steve, and they can't wait for me to tell this story because they want to hear about what a horrible person Steve is. And I really don't have that point of view. I mean, I understand that. Steve is, okay, Steve has a large, well-respected body of work. He has this personality that is enviably sure of his place in the universe. And let's see. There are people who, that think that he's a jerk, and there are people that think that he's overbearing and so on. And it suddenly occurred to me one day, it's like, I can hear all those things and say, well, yeah, I understand all those things, and I actually agree to some degree with most of those things. But I still like him. And how can I explain that? And then one day it occurred to me what the deal was. You know how Marty Goodman is another person who is a very colorful individual, very opinionated, very loudmouth. He'll tell you what he thinks, and if you don't like it, that's really too bad. But I liked Marty, and him and I had a lot of really interesting adventures when we both lived in California. And Jim Reed from Rainbow Magazine used to describe Marty as the Howard Cosell of the CoCo world. Well, then I'm thinking of, well, okay, large body of work that is well respected, overbearing, egotistical. Lots of people hate him. Lots of people love him. And I thought, oh, that's it. That's perfect. Steve is the William Shatner of the color computer world. That's my. Isn't it perfect?
It is perfect.
Yes.
That describes him.
Exactly what you meant. I think we've all met Steve, and he is very self-assured and confident, and he definitely, I can see where he could be overbearing, but still you just kind of like the guy anyway, So,
and I do. When we would rub shoulders at color computer conventions, and he would do things like take over my talks, and then he would apologize for it afterwards. I can see how somebody would really, it's like I would have a talk, and then I would start talking, and then he would interject something, and then he would interject something else, and something else, and then pretty soon he's like pretty much doing like 2/3 of the talking. And then he would apologize afterwards. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take over your panel. And it's like, well, you kind of did, but somehow I didn't mind. I don't, I really can't explain it to you. It's like I can see how some people might be sore about that, and I totally understand that. But somehow I just didn't feel that way. So we got along okay. And all I got to say is Steve is Steve, So when I saw Steve, when I got into the room, it's like, oh, you're the guy that's going to take it over. Well, that's great. And I thought to myself, oh boy, I have no idea what you're in for. But but he took a look at it and he says, oh, I can see your problem right here. And he started going off about, well, you programmed the upper levels in C, and that means it's really inefficient. So that means that, oh man, I'm going to do this all 100% in assembler, and it's going to be so much more efficient. And that's your problem right there. And so, I've solved it already, and this is going to be great. Him and his girlfriend were there, and they were like looking at each other and just grinning from ear to ear. And it's like, we're going to make a mint on this. This is awesome. This is going to be easy. And so fast forward to I did some work for him. He needed like the data that I had developed from the game. He needed it in a different format, so I made it in a different format and sent it off to him. And then I didn't hear any more about it for quite a while. And then I was at a color computer convention, and I saw Steve again. And we were in a bar, and we were with a whole bunch of people, and we were laughing and talking, and he's pontificating from his end of the table. And he's saying, yeah, a lot of people like what I did on such and such, and a lot of people think I'm a nice guy. Of course, there are some people that think I'm a, and then he used the word for a sphincter of the nether regions. Isn't that right, Rick? And he turns to me, and he's just like staring daggers at me, and I'm like, he's really mad. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, when did I call him that? Because there are a lot of people that might want to take you aside and say, that's Steve. He's really a such and such, isn't he? And it's like, and I would typically say, well, yeah, but I get along with him and blah blah blah, and he's done this good thing and he's done that bad thing. So I always go from that to leading into something more positive. So maybe he heard me saying that, and he heard me say the operative phrase. Well, yes, he may be one of those, but let me tell you something different. So, because frankly, I didn't remember calling him that. So anyway, after he turns on me and says, some people think I'm this, isn't that right, Rick? Then he lowers his voice and he leans in close. He says, I'll have you know, we lost our shirts on that project. And so I told him, well, I said, Steve, it was a very unhappy time for everyone concerned, because that's literally what it was. I actually hadn't known until that moment that he didn't, that he had pretty much an equally bad experience with it as I did. So I'm like, yeah, I feel your pain. So that's the whole Last Ninja thing. And then eventually he came out with the sort of a demo of it at a color computer convention, and I saw that video. So, and so that was that. It pretty much looked exactly as it did when I left it. I don't doubt that he did something with it. It's not like he just took what I did and showed it off at the color computer. No, that didn't happen. I assure you of that. I know he made a good faith effort to finish it, and I'm sure he had a horrible time of it. He was saying later that in the middle of the game, there's one scene where you cross a river. It's like, oh, it's a scene where you cross a river. You can tell from the background graphics that, okay, and there's these stones that you hop over to cross this river. That's marvelous. He says, what they didn't tell me was the freaking dragon that comes out and does battle with you as you're halfway across, and they didn't tell me about that. And so then I had to put that in, and, so he was pretty mad about that, and I kind of understand that. I think, wasn't it done under OS 9 also?
I think it must have been.
Yeah,
because I remember doing the music for it, and doing music under OS 9, well, I suppose if you're, really a genius, you can do it, but I wasn't up to the task. And when you play it on the Amiga, of course, since they've got all that hardware support for the music sounded awesome. And, I managed to get it to do like one voice music, really, really clipped, little bits and bloops, and sort of do the main theme, but it didn't sound. It sounded terrible compared to the original.
Yeah.
It really sounds like you pretty much had to kind of reverse engineer the game as you were going. That can't help.
Yeah. So yeah, it was just too aggressive of a time schedule. I'm sorry, what?
I was going to say, was that unusual back in the day? I've heard differing accounts. Some people say that they basically just got a project assigned and said, here, go clone the game, and here's a bag of quarters, go play it if you want to. And
Shanghai was much like that, but they gave me a lot more direction. This was, it's like Shanghai. It took me a while to figure out how do you draw these tiles in 3D, and
Yeah.
how do you do all the hidden line for it and stuff? And it turns out it's done a really cheap way, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't think of it, which is you just draw the back tiles first, and then you draw the tiles in the foreground in front of those.
Right.
So when you see it draw, it starts drawing from the back and goes toward the front. So simple.
Which is actually a nice effect, right?
So I was thinking some sort of fancy hidden line algorithm, and it's like, oh no, don't have to do any of that. So,
cool.
So that was I learned two very important things. Number one, I am not immortal, and two, no is a very useful word. To this day, sometimes when I'm about to take on a project, my wife will say, "Now, this isn't going to be like another Last Ninja, right?" And sometimes I have to say, it might be. Maybe I should listen to you.
That's a term.
Okay,
now.
you were going to say.
I was actually going to ask you. You had another unreleased game, but this was your own, though.
Oh, right, yeah. Bomb Threat, right?
Yeah, I remember seeing it. You posted a video not too long ago.
Yeah, that was. There is. Theoretically, there are floppy disks in my basement someplace that have that game on it. But I have looked and looked, and I can't find it. There is a lot of stuff in my basement, though. So, down there, down some corridor right next to the Ark of the Covenant might be that game. I don't know.
It's right next to the original maps for Temple of Ram.
right.
Probably.
So, every once in a while I go down and poke around and try to find it. And I haven't been able to find it. But anyway, so I developed that one, and that was an original game. It involved, you've probably seen the video of it. You're in a warehouse, and you have all these crates of merchandise, and some crazy person has come in and planted bombs all over the place. And some of the bombs are out in plain sight, and they have little fuses. And when they're about to explode, you can see the little fuses light and then start to burn down. And then sometimes, just to mix things up, they put the bombs in the crates full of merchandise. So you're trying to save the crates of merchandise, and you're trying to get them away from the bombs before they blow up. And so, you'll be pushing a crate to safety, and suddenly, it's got a bomb in it. Great. Okay, change of plans. We're leaving this thing, someplace off on the edge. So you save as many crates of merchandise as you can when the last bomb blows up, and then it tallies up your score, and then you go on to another screen where there's more bombs and more crates and all that sort of thing. And so I sent that off to Radio Shack, and I didn't hear back from them for a long time. And I asked them, so what's up with that game? Are you going to buy that game? And so finally I got an answer out of them, which was, no, we're not going to buy that. And I tried to sell it to a number of other places that Dale Lear had sold games to. And so he gave me their contact information, and they didn't want to buy it either. So I thought, much later, I thought, well, there's that game from so long ago. I should dig that up. I know right where that is. It's like right on a bookshelf, and it's in a plastic box that's got floppies in it. And, I'll just go down there and get that, and I'll just send that to some color computer person. And, and then the color computer community will have a game out of nowhere. That'll be awesome. So I went down and looked, and it wasn't there. So, I found I found a box, but it had Shanghai discs in it, and it didn't have any Bomb Threat book discs in it. So, and then I looked. Well, it's like, well, if it isn't there, then it's probably here. Well, it's not there either. Okay, maybe it's over here. Well, no. And so looking, and so I had pretty much given up. And And my kids were sitting around one day talking. Well, actually, my oldest son and my middle son were talking in his apartment and talking about, back in the old days when, we used to play Dad's games on the color computer. And they got to play games, and it's like, they got to have me come into their school and show videos of the games. And, these are the games that my dad is working on. My dad, programs video games. And so that was like a little,
cool.
It's like, you meet cool, to all your friends at school. My dad's a game designer. Oh, gosh. And they were talking about that and saying, yeah, it's a pity you can't find that game. And then my oldest said, hey, wait. He used to come to school with us and show us the games that he was working on. And so he had like a VCR tape of these games. There was like Shanghai, and there was Bomb Threat, and there was Temple of Rom. I think I know where that VCR tape is. So they came running right home, and they ran down to the basement, started throwing all these tapes around, and here it is, I got it. So we digitized that, and so I put that on YouTube. And so now I don't have the game, but I can show you a video of me playing it.
That's proof.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Just sort of torture me or something. So
you don't have a spec for the game, do you? Maybe somebody could re-implement it.
Well, they probably could. So I can describe how it worked, but you had a little. My kids, when they were younger, they called it the tractor game because it had a little tractor, a little forklift tractor you could move around, and it made a grinding noise that went around the screen. And if you bumped into a box and pushed it, it would push that box, and then if you pushed that against another box, it would push 2 boxes, 3 boxes, 4 boxes. And the more boxes you pushed, it just happened that the animation would get slower, and the grinding noise that the tractor made would get lower. Well, that was because, I was using timing loops and things, and I wasn't using interrupts to do the sound. So I thought, I could make that, be the same, pitch, no matter how many boxes that you're pushing. But actually, that seems kind of cool that it works that way, because you're pushing more boxes, so your tractor has to work harder. So it all just seemed intuitive. So I left that alone. And then if you pushed against a box and then you pulled backwards, and you went backwards. If you pushed down the fire button as you went backwards, it would latch onto one box. So you could, you'd be like pushing 3 boxes, and then you could push the fire button and hold it, and then reverse course and pull back 1 box. Because, the other boxes weren't attached to that. So it's kind of like you could like put a little hook out and, just grab 1 box coming back. So they had that dynamic. And then that's about all there is to know other than watching the video, really. And the boxes had a plus sign and a square and a circle on them. And the plus sign was worth more, and you can pretty much tell the scoring by looking at the video. And then for each, and then it shows the attract mode at the beginning of the game, where you just fire it up and then you just leave it running. That's for, if you have it running in a Radio Shack store, it just sort of shows this is what the game is doing. And it does like a sample playing of the game, and then it does like the title screen and the copyright message, and doesn't, and then it's silent for a good long time, and then it'll make a little bit of noise, and then it'll shut up because you want it to attract attention, but you don't want it to attract so much attention that the store manager comes over and shuts it off. So you got all that going on. So yeah, maybe somebody could do that.
So
pretty crazy.
You should get Simon Jonas and or someone else who's looking for a project. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I should make it. I should make another attempt to find the discs. That would be nice, but we'll see.
Definitely. Well, we could all come by and help you dig out your basement.
Oh yeah,
we'd be happy to.
Sounds fun.
Yep. Yeah, all my.
Well, what about what are the?
What?
Go ahead.
All my computer, color computer stuff. Eventually, it got to the point where I wasn't doing anything with it, and so I decided to give it a good home. So somebody came and picked it up and took off with it. I used to remember his name, but I don't really remember anymore. He'll probably speak up soon or something. So,
Well, so what are the chances?
What are the chances of?
I was going to say, what are the chances? What are the chances of getting you out to a CoCo Fest or maybe another retro computing event later in the year? You're in the Midwest now.
Yep. Yeah, I'm near Minneapolis in Minnesota. I don't really have the money for that sort of thing. Which reminds me of a story. I was the keynote speaker for a Rainbow Fest once, and Lonnie called me up and said, "Rick, how would you like to be the keynote speaker for Rainbow Fest?" And I said, "Oh, that sounds great." And I said, "But I have no money for such a thing." He says, "Oh, you don't? Oh, let me get back to you." So he hangs up, and then he calls me back a little while later. He says, "Rick, I've got good news. We will pay for your hotel room." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Perhaps you didn't understand when I said I had no money for such a thing. I have no money for such a thing."
Yeah.
So he says, "I'll get back to you." So he hangs up, and he calls back a while later. He says, "Okay, I have more good news. Okay, we will pay for your plane ticket." I said, "Okay, good." So he paid for my plane ticket. It has to have been the cheapest plane ticket on that plane because I was like dead center in the back. It was the roughest ride I have ever had, but it was free. I can't complain. Well, I just did, obviously, but I shouldn't. And I had a great time. So
cool.
Yeah.
Well,
I have no money. I have no money for such a thing. I have thought about it, but I actually have another trip I want to take this year, and so literally the answer is I do have money for such a thing. I have money for one such a thing, and I already have someplace else that I'm going. There's like a family reunion thing that I'm going to go to. So.
Well, I understand. Well, maybe you'd be open if we took up a collection, and maybe we could make something happen that way.
If you did and got enough money for my plane ticket, I mean, I would go, but I would feel really bad. I would feel really guilty.
Well, that's all right. Neil brings something to drink that would help you with that.
Let's call up Lonnie. Maybe he'll spring for it, or maybe not.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we've got, of course, in a couple of months, we've got CoCo Fest coming up in the Chicago area.
That's right.
Then,
I think that's pretty much the closest one.
And then in October, we're planning a new event. We're calling it Tandy Assembly, and it's a retro computing event dedicated to Tandy computers of all shapes and sizes. We're collaborating with some Z80 TRS-80 folks and trying to get some participation from the Tandy 1000 line, whoever's collecting those these days. And whatever else, pocket computers, Zoomers, whatever you got. But yeah, we're planning that in October in Chillicothe, Ohio. A little out of the way, but it's not terribly far, I'd say.
Sort of my neck of
And
the woods, yeah.
I don't know, maybe we could pass the hat and see what we can find out.
Well,
maybe you could even.
So after the Color Computer years, so nowadays, my big claim to fame is AMC, the movie channel. It used to be American Movie Channel, but now it's just sort of its own network. AMC has a show called Halt and Catch Fire that just recently finished up, I think, all about the early PC industry. And one of the things they did in an early episode was they had all their programmers in the show playing the Crowther and Woods adventure game. And so they said, wouldn't it be nice, since we're doing that, we need like some background information on it for our website. So they said, well, let's find, who has the site that knows the most about that adventure game. And they found my site, which is on the adventure game, which is like the site that's, for many years it's been, one of the biggest ones with all kinds of historical trivia about that game and stuff. So they said, okay, this guy knows a lot. Let's call him up. So they called me up and they said, we would like for you to write an article for us on, basically on that game and the history of it and how it works and all that sort of stuff so that we can put it on our website. I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And then they also said, and we're also looking to hire somebody to program a version of the game that would work on the web. And I said, well, I know just the person for that. It's me. And they said, oh, really? Okay, great.
Cool.
So long story short, they did that. And so that's on the web. And so if you go to rickadams.org, it'll have a link to my adventure page. And then on that adventure page, it has a link to the game that I did for them. So that's fun.
Awesome.
And I do a lot of Raspberry Pi stuff. And a lot of stuff for the Amazon Echo. And my other two big hobbies that are, geekish are I do LED signs for Christmas. Put like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of LED lights in my windows and then program them to scroll text by and, look, there goes Santa Claus, he's scrolling by. And then here's some snowflakes scrolling vertically. Here's text going by horizontally saying, let it snow and all of that sort of thing. And then, so I do that every year for Christmas. And then when Christmas is over with, my wife says, those lights are coming out of my windows on January 1st, mister. And so they are banished to the basement windows where they show like the date and the time and the weather. And so, so we have people, my son went from he took a flight and came in and took an Uber to my house and coming from the airport. And the Uber guy said, oh, that address, is that house with the lights in it? He says, yeah, it is. He says, that's so cool. Actually, cool. Right now, last night I changed it. Instead of doing the weather and the date and the time, I had Pac-Man scrolling by. So it draws the little light up, the power dots across, and then here comes the Pac-Man eating them up, and then the ghost's right behind. And then as soon as he scrolls across the whole screen, then it redraws it, and then he comes back the other way. So I did that. And then I have like a watch face that I do for my Pebble smartwatch in C. So, I'm still keeping the geek flag going. So, and then my big hobby for the last about 7 years is that I run an internet streaming radio station that plays Japanese pop music 24/7.
Oh, cool.
So,
oh Lord, what is that link? What is that URL?
that would be if you go to rickadams.org. There's a link to that too.
Do you?
The reason I always have to the reason I have to say rickadams.org and then follow the link is because the name of the radio station is Yggdrasil Radio, and nobody is going to know how to spell
I see. Right.
Matter of fact,
that's pretty funny.
When you use my Amazon Echo to play my radio station, I'm right next to it, so I can't say the wake word. So I'll pretend that the wake word is echo instead of the usual word. But you say, echo, play Yggdrasil Radio on TuneIn. You have to pronounce it like that, and then it'll understand it. It took me like 47 billion tries to figure out how does it think that's pronounced, because I would say it the way that I thought it was pronounced, and it wouldn't get it. So you just have to say it just right. And then usually I'll say, play the last tune-in station that I played, and then it'll play that. So I don't have to, get it exactly right.
Do you ever go live on that radio station?
No, I never have. There is my voice recorded on it doing station promos and stuff. My voice is giving out right now, but actually I have worked as an actual DJ before.
Awesome.
People always tell me, you have a DJ voice. I say, well, funny you should mention that. One time I called into the radio station that I worked for, and they said, and they didn't know who I was, and they said, you have a really good voice. You should come in and DJ for us. And I said, well, actually, I already DJ for you.
Oh, how embarrassing. Oh, that's pretty funny.
So, well, now I know where they're going to find my replacement for,
Yeah, whoever randomly calls into the station, that'll be your replacement. Well, cool. Well, so what have we not covered?
I can think of one thing.
Okay.
I'm curious about, back in the day myself, I used your UUCP package in OS 9.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I used it a lot. I'm interested to hear, about how you developed that or what you use it for.
I had a great story behind that one.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Well, once upon a time, who was working on that? Mark Griffiths and one other, possibly, who was the big OS 9 guy that was connected with CompuServe? Big OS 9 guy. I'm not Greg Law. Well, I don't remember, but yeah. So Mark Griffiths and another guy that was connected with CompuServe. This is back in the days when I was on Delphi, and I was like, sort of color computer SIG staff there. And so there was like this big rivalry going on between CompuServe and Delphi. And when I would develop things, I would put them on Delphi, and then, and then the CompuServe guys would say, hey, that's really great. Can we put it on CompuServe? And I'd say, sure. And so they would. But a lot of times when they came up with stuff, the CompuServe guys came up with stuff, they would have it up on, they would say, we've just come up with this, and we've released it, and we've put it on CompuServe only. And in about 2 or 3 weeks, if we're feeling really magnanimous, we'll let you put it on Delphi too. And it's like, well, if you do the work and it's your product, you get to say what happens to it. So there, I didn't have any complaints about that. That's just not how I did things. So they were working on a UUCP package, and they were going on and on about how wonderful it was going to be. And then they said, well, we're testing it now, and it's almost ready to release. And so, and as soon as we get it all ready, it's almost ready. As soon as we come out with it, we'll come out with it and we'll put it on CompuServe only. And I'm like, and at first I was mad. It's like, oh, come on, guys, And then I thought, well, no, that's fair. If they do the work and they make it, they get to say what happens to it, and that's perfectly fair. But I don't like it. And so people had been trying to talk me into doing a UUCP implementation for years. And they've sent me, all the specs and, all kinds of notes about it and stuff. And I said, well, how hard can it be? Let me pull those out. And so I pulled those out. And in about 3 days, I sent my first email. I was the UUCP, the guy who ran that whole thing for Usenet at work, so I could connect to my work computer as a UUCP node, and test that way and get that working. In about 3 or 4 days, I basically had it working, and so Mark Griffith said, if you can read this, he sent an email to the Usenet group. What was it? OS CoCo or whatever it was the news group that they were in. And he says, he sent an email that got sent to that and posted to that. Said, if you can read this, this is the first posting from a color computer ever. And so soon thereafter, I sent my own posting, which says, actually, the first posting from a color computer was about a week ago from my computer. And I just didn't tell you at the time because I didn't know if it was going to work or not, and I didn't want to embarrass myself. But this particular posting was from my color computer. Oh, and by the way, my color computer, if you look, is now listed in the UUCP maps. And there was great excitement. They said, and they were very nice about it. Really, no, they were not salty about it at all. They were like, holy cow, that is awesome. We had no idea you were doing that. That is great. So, they had the proper spirit about the whole thing, really, as did I think. And I said, and I'll be putting this up on Delphi and CompuServe at the same time. So that's what we did. And then some years later, Bob Bilson and somebody else that I'm embarrassed to say that I have forgotten his name because he was a very nice person, had nice things to say about me recently. So that's why I'm embarrassed. But he redid it and made it much, much better. And then released that.
I think Boise worked on that too.
Oh, really? Boise. Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Boise was always nice to me on Delphi. So.
Cool.
Oh, that's the story behind that.
Wow.
Crazy story.
All right. Well, what else have we not covered then? What did you think of the CoCo versus its competitors in the day? Clearly, you must have had some preference for it.
What did I think about the CoCo as opposed to what now?
As opposed to its competitors, the Commodore 64 or...
Well, I sort of went back and forth. At the very beginning, I had my I think I had my eyes on like an Atari ST. I had pretty much decided to get that. I was saving up my money. But then when all three of my friends at work, my closest friends at work, bought a color computer, and then they were digging into it and finding out things, and they showed me the thing about the hooks and low memory and stuff. It's like, oh, you guys really know this stuff. I'm like, I'm going to get that because then we can all work on it together,
Right.
And so we all, so we all play tested all of our games. I play tested on Color Baseball and Jim Issel, the guy who later wrote for Rainbow. He wasn't really a software guy, but he says, "Oh, I get to be a software groupie." I get all these games, and so we got to see what the games looked like at first, and what we named them, and then what we named them later. the doubleback originally was named Superfly and the Amazing Chomping Things.
Of course.
So
that's a good bit of trivia for the quiz this year.
Yeah. Firecopter was originally named Firebug. And TS Edit, somebody once asked him, what does TS stand for other than the obvious? And he said, text screen. But TS Edit was originally named Wordbird. And color baseball, of course, was always color baseball. So, so how did we get into this, Bud?
Asking what you thought of the CoCo versus his competitors.
Oh, right, yeah. So once my three friends, got color computers and were so into it, I got it, and so we could all, be into it together. So, but I had to save up my money. I got, I think it was a income tax refund. And we lived in a drafty old house in the country that didn't have a working furnace. And with the first of my income tax refund checks from, say, I think we were getting one from the state and one from the feds. And so with the first one that I got, I bought a color computer and a monitor, TV. And then with the second check, I bought a space heater for the house. And my wife to this day is of the opinion that I should have bought those two items in the reverse order.
Yeah, I can see that. That's funny.
Of course, that was in that was in California. If we lived in Minnesota at the time, I think I would have bought them in reverse order, because otherwise we all would have died. Because it gets like minus. The worst I've ever seen here is minus 26 without the wind chill.
Ooh. Wow.
That hurt.
Yeah.
I was working in a place that had it was a really, really big place that I worked for at the time that had a huge parking lot. So I had to walk way out in the parking lot to where my car was parked in minus 26. And man, that hurt.
Yeah, that one.
It hasn't been too bad. We've seen like minus, I don't know, maybe we've seen minus 20 this winter. It's the snow. We're going to get a snow tonight, and so tomorrow we'll be digging ourselves out from under. So that won't be a whole lot of fun. So what else, guys? Yeah, I'm glad I didn't miss the UUCP story. That was kind of fun.
I have one question. I guess it's the $1 million question that probably all our listeners are wondering right now. Or Rick, would you ever consider doing another game for the CoCo?
I definitely would if I had a color computer, but I don't. And
that.
Well, yeah,
I bet we can fix it.
Yeah, we can fix that easy.
I tried arranging. At one point, it's like I have a bunch of discs that are, I believe, just Shanghai discs, and it would be great to read those off. And it's like I don't know what personal files are on there, so I don't want to just ship them off to somebody. So I tried to arrange at one point. Somebody said they were going to send me a system, and they didn't. Now it's like if you sent me a system, I might make a game, but I would just feel so bad. It's like, do I have the time to make a game? Assembly programming, it's like I would need an assembler. I would need all kinds of stuff, and, would I have the time to do that? I don't know. So, I totally understand what you're saying. And I'm largely sympathetic, but I just wonder how that would work out.
The time is the big thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, oh man, could I, I wish I could find bomb threat, all kinds of stuff like that. So, it's an interesting idea, and I'm sympathetic, but I feel kind of strange and guilty about it. So we'll have to think about that.
Okay. Yeah, well, think about it. I'm sure we could arrange something if it made the difference.
Right. Well, I appreciate that.
But like you said, we're already figuring on passing the hat to get you to Tandy Assembly or maybe CoCo Fest. So.
Yep. Another thing that'll make me feel guilty.
Well, okay. Neil's in charge of making sure that doesn't happen. So. Okay. All right. Well, this has been a great talk, Rick. Definitely nice to have you on, and nice to hear your stories.
Yep.
And nice to chat about the old CoCo. Mm-hmm. So definitely thank you for coming on and talking to us. And
yep, it was a fun time.
We're gonna call you called Steve Bjork and beep.
No, actually, I did not use that word. I kept it all nice and safe.
Oh,
I used euphemism.
We might have to bleep that one, I guess. Anyway. All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks, Rick.
Well, it's your podcast. You can use that word if you want to.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rick. It was a great chat.
Okay, thanks a lot for having me. All right. So, any questions you guys have, you know where to find me. So.
We appreciate it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you and goodbye.
Cool.
Bye.
Yeah, take care.
Take care.
Stay calm. I'm going to materialize and take a reading.
Where are we?
We're still in the solar system.
Mistress, Master, I believe we are on Earth, North America, CoCo Fest, Lombard, Illinois, U.S.
Don't flash your eyes at me.
The TRS-80 color computer was based on the Motorola 6809 processor. CoCo Fest was a gathering held each year to celebrate the computer.
Quite warm. Around 20 degrees. Very humid.
Doctor, look!
Mistress, that is a TRS-80 color computer 3 with multi-pack interface.
Fascinating. What an engineering achievement, eh?
Mistress, Master, CoCo Fest is held on April 22nd and 23rd in Lombard, Illinois. I shall explore further.
Don't joggle, Leela. Don't joggle. You can look in a minute.
Welcome back to the Games Corner.
The Warrior King. Become Rastan, Warrior King on the quest to regain his rightful crown. Hidden deep within a sinister land. Battle monsters, gain magic and weapons, and travel through harsh wilderness and dark castle dungeons in this medieval realm. From the creator of Kung Fu Dude comes the awesome arcade game for the CoCo 3. Warrior King uses the most detailed 320 by 216 color graphics and high-speed machine code to vault you into a world of fantasy.
Dare ye challenge the many perils ahead in order to become Warrior King?
Warrior King requires a 128K CoCo 3 disc drive and joystick. Only $29.95 from Sundog Systems.
Hey, wait. Where did that come from? Did you just hear that commercial? Well, now I have no choice but to review this game. I was really trying to put this one off, because unlike all my other game reviews I've done in the past, this one is the complete opposite. Why, you may ask? Because I just flat out don't like this game. It drives me bonkers. It pains me to give a negative review for a game on a CoCo 3 platform. And let me reassure you, that commercial you just heard gives the game a lot more credit. Please don't be fooled by this ad. Well, before I get into what makes this game a retro stinker, here's a rundown of what the game is. Warrior King is a clone of the arcade game Rastan. Object of the game is to recover Rastan's crown from the evil forces that stole it. Now, for any of you who have never played or heard of Rastan, or in this case, Warrior King, it is a side-scroller fighting type game, where you have to fight enemies through each level. This game was coded by Glenn Dahlgren in 1988 and published by Sundog Games. It features multiple levels, digitized sounds, and absolutely gorgeous 320 by 200 by 16 color graphics. It comes on 2 floppy disks and requires a Tandy Color Computer 3 with 128K of memory. According to L. Curtis Boyle's website, it was one of the first Sundog games made for the Color Computer 3. I tend to believe that because, well, Curtis is a trustworthy, reliable kind of guy, and he has been in the CoCo scene since the early days. Now here are my views for the game. My favorite part of this game is the title screen and the animation of the doors opening at the beginning. After that, this is where things start to fall apart. Level 1, you start out on a nice grass terrain and enemies are coming at you from the right. Once you start moving, you will notice that it is only a single button joystick game, which is a shame because the Color Computer 3 has 2-button joystick support. So meaning in order to jump, you must press up on your joystick. The problem with this is you have a very touchy accuracy when jumping up on platforms and dodging enemies at the same time. You have to make sure you are on the right step of your walk before you push up and to the right at the exact same time. This is very frustrating and annoying. Now, even more annoying, you are on the first level and finally made it up to the first platform, only to walk along the screen as it's scrolling and you come across a plateau. What do? Keep walking and hope there's another plateau underneath to catch you? Or take your chances and jump into midair? Problem is you can't see the bottom because you cannot look down in this game. So you are taking a wild guess, and that's exactly what I did. I kept walking only to find my character drowning into a body of water. Oh, and once you die, you are escorted back to the very start of the level, only to go through it all over again. Now, I don't consider myself to be a pro gamer or anything like that, but I do like to think I can hold my own. To this day, I've never completed level 1 of this game. I will, however, make this a goal of mine to try to finish at least level 1. If any of you have made it past level 1, I'd really like to hear some feedback from you, even if you tell me my game playing sucks and to stop whining. I think what frustrates me most about this game is that it could have been dynamite. It really had the potential with the amazing graphics and digitized sound. I used to see this game advertised in the Rainbow magazines, and I would always lust over the graphics and write up on it. I seriously want to like this game, even to this day. Now, Glenn has 2 other offerings for fighting games that you can check out. They were much better in my opinion, such as Kung Fu Dude for the Color Computer 1 and 2 platform. And he also created Kayum Gai to be Ninja for the Color Computer 3, which was released in 1989, just after Warrior King. And that game was incredible. I still play those games from time to time. Well, I guess we can let this one slide if it was the first Color Computer 3 game made by Sundog. Hopefully I've encouraged some of you to go try this game and see if you can get past level 1. Well, that's all the time we have for this month. Until next month, happy CoCo Gaming.
You're listening to the CoCo Crew Podcast.
Well, it's that time again. We have reached the end of episode 20. We would like to thank Rick Adams for giving us some of his time to interview him this month. I'd also like to thank our host John Linville for keeping up with the latest news and events and providing us with yet again another awesome tech segment. I seriously don't know how he does it. I also like to thank Mike Rowan for being a full-time part of the show now and making those amazing commercials and audio bumpers that you hear. I must say I enjoy the editing part a lot more now with those cool sound bites. And last but not least, we would like to thank all of you for listening each month and your support and dedication for this podcast. Remember to show your retro computer friends what a CoCo is, and be sure to mention this podcast. They will soon realize that you